Chapter 39:15. The sudden appearance of a star venerate's aura in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion stunned Yetion. His expression changed in astonishment. He did not expect there to be another star venerate in a Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Furthermore, this star venerate's aura was different from the white tiger star venerate's aura he sensed earlier. It was clearly another star venerate. Yetion, are you alright? Emo could not help but frown when he saw Nyetion's strange expression. He felt that Nyetion had been acting strangely. Did something serious really happen to him? I'm fine. Nyetion smiled faintly and said, let's go in first. All right. Emo did not say anything else. He nodded and entered the Myriad Yuan Pavilion with Nyetion and the others. Under the guidance of a steward of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, they quickly arrived at a luxurious VIP room. Everyone, please wait here for a moment. Once the person you are waiting for appears, I will immediately send someone to inform you. The steward bowed slightly and left. After the steward left, Chi Chanfeng could not help but ask curiously as he looked around the room. This place is rather grand. What exactly does it do? Not only did the Myriad Yuan Pavilion look very strange from the outside, even the interior of the building was very strange. Each and every room was separated by a barrier, and every single room was sealed, just like a prison cell. The strangest thing was that the interior of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion was like a huge maze. Furthermore, the space was filled with the auras of various formations. Clearly, there was more than one defensive formation inside. The auras of the various formations overlapped. Even a formation master would find it difficult to find a weak point. The tight security of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion made one wonder. What exactly was this place? Teacher instructed me not to ask about anything about the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. He told me to just wait patiently for him. Emo said with a frown. It seems this place is quite mysterious. Nyetion couldn't help but chuckle and didn't say anything else. He was not interested in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Right now, he was only concerned about the star venerate hiding in the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Following that, everyone waited quietly in the room. They were not in a rush. After a while, the steward reappeared and entered the room. Is the teacher here? Emo couldn't help but ask excitedly when he saw the supervisor. No. The steward calmly shook his head and looked at Nyetion. He bowed slightly and respectfully said, Young master, please follow me. Emo couldn't help but be disappointed. When he saw the steward call out Nyetion, his expression couldn't help but change. Nyetion had just arrived at the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, and it was even his first time in Vast Cloud Sacred City. It was unlikely that he knew anyone from the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Nyetion looked at the steward and was not surprised. He only nodded slightly and stood up. Young master, please. The steward bowed slightly, then pushed open the door and led the way. I'll be right back. Nyetion smiled faintly. After informing Emo and the others, he followed the steward. A moment later, he was led to a room by the steward. This room seemed a little different from the others. A faint breath of time and space was being emitted from the outside, as if it was a special inner space that was isolated from the space in front of him. Young master, please. The steward bowed slightly and gestured, but he didn't enter. Nyetion nodded and stepped into the door that seemed to be a tunnel of time and space. The next moment, he came to a mysterious space. His surroundings seemed to be empty. Apart from the blinding white light, there was nothing else. This really is another space. Nyetion's eyes narrowed, and he mumbled. Then, he began to observe his surroundings, but found nothing. It was as if he was the only person in this space. He couldn't help but be confused, and his expression changed. Sir Star Sky Saint, are you looking for me? Just then, a powerful voice was heard. It seemed to be coming from all directions, causing Nyetion's brain to explode. He suddenly turned around and saw that there was an old man in white behind him. The old man in white was short and fat, with white hair and beard. He was looking at Nyetion with a smile. At first glance, he looked like an amiable grandpa next door. You are. Nyetion's eyes trembled and his expression froze. He said, Star Lord, He felt a strong aura of star souls from the old man in front of him. At this moment, the resonance of the star souls in his body was very obvious. There was no doubt that this short and fat old man was a Star Lord. Yes, the short and stout old man nodded as he stared at Nyetian with blazing eyes, as if he wanted to see through him. He nodded as he looked, as if he was very satisfied with Nyetian. "How should I address you, sir?" Nyetian asked with a dry cough, feeling a little uncomfortable under the old man's gaze. "You can call me Qing Chi." The stocky old man smiled faintly, but his eyes were still looking Nyetian up and down. With a chuckle, he said, "Young man, it must have been very difficult for you to climb all the way from the lowest plane of existence to where you are now." "Huh?" Nyetian could not help but frown when he heard Qing Chi's words. He asked in confusion, "Sir Qing Chi, how did you know that I came from a plane world?" This was the first time that Nyetian and Qing Chi met, but the latter could tell at a glance that he came from a plane world. It was really surprising. Qing Chi laughed, but did not answer Nyetian. Instead, he asked, "Sir Star Sky Saint, are you here to participate in the recruitment of the 5 academies?" "Yeah." Nyetian nodded, but deep down, he was very confused. He was very curious about Qing Chi's strength. But when he tried to perceive Qing Chi's aura, his spiritual soul power seemed to be trapped in an ocean. He could not feel any aura at all. Instead, he felt panic as if he had fallen into an abyss. "Sir Star Sky Saint, with all due respect, it is a little unrealistic for you to pass the test of the 5 academies with your strength." Qing Chi chuckled and said with a playful look, "Do you have a way to help me improve my cultivation?" Nyetian's eyes were burning. He did not hesitate and asked directly. After coming to Haoyun's sacred city, he realized how difficult the test of the 5 academies was. The competitors he faced were too strong. If he was only at the 9th level of the heavenly mandate realm, it would be very difficult for him to make it to the end. "If I'm not wrong, you had just broken through the 9th level of the heavenly mandate realm, right?" Qing Chi's eyes flashed slightly, and he looked at Nyetian and asked, "Yes." Nyetian did not hide it and nodded heavily. Although it is only one step from the 9th level of the heavenly mandate realm to the 1st level of the heavenly mandate realm, it is not easy for every warrior. Qing Chi's eyes darkened slightly, and he said, "Under normal circumstances, even the top geniuses need several years to break through from the 9th level of the heavenly mandate realm to the 1st level of the heavenly mandate realm." Chapter 39:16. Hearing Qing Chi's words, Nyetian could not help but look gloomy, and he was in low spirits. He also knew that he had just broken through to the 9th level of the heavenly mandate realm. It would indeed be difficult for him to make further breakthroughs. Furthermore, he had only broken through to the 9th level of the heavenly mandate realm with the help of the supreme double seals. If he really continued to break through, even his martial body would not be able to bear it. But things had already come to this point, and he had no other choice but to force himself to move forward. He was still thinking about the 5-day appointment with White Tiger Star Lord, and he wanted to know what White Tiger Star Lord had prepared for him. In fact, if you really want to break through, it is not impossible. At this time, Qing Chi laughed and looked at Nyetian, saying, "But you have to find another Star Lord. He should have something that can help you break through." "White Tiger Star Lord?" Nyetian asked in shock, his eyes trembling. "You have already met that guy?" Qing Chi's eyes changed when he heard Nyetian mention White Tiger Star Lord, and he asked in shock. Apparently, he did not expect that Nyetian had already met White Tiger Star Lord. "Yes." Nyetian nodded and told him about his meeting with White Tiger Star Lord. In the end, he could not help but sigh and said, "Senior White Tiger must have been a little disappointed in me, so he left." "Humph." Qing Chi laughed and said, "Old White is disappointed in everyone." A bitter smile appeared on Nyetian's face. "But since Old White has already found you and asked you to break through within 5 days, things will be a little troublesome." Qing Chi shook his head, also feeling helpless. "Senior Qing Chi, you just said that Senior White Tiger has something that can help me break through. Why didn't he just give it to me?" Nyetian's mouth twitched, and he asked with a speechless expression. Qing Chi frowned and said, Old White is always harsh to everyone. Even you, the Star Sky Saint Lord, are no exception. This, Nyetian was stunned and couldn't speak for a moment. After a while, Ching Chi looked at Nyetian and said with a burning look in his eyes, Lord Star King, if you really want to make a breakthrough, I have another way. However, it's risky, painful, and you'll have to sacrifice something. What is it? Nyetian's eyes lit up as he asked in surprise. The thing on your forehead is the Saint's Spirit Blood Seal, right? Ching Chi's eyes slightly narrowed as he looked at Nyetian and asked. Nyetian nodded. Could it be that Ching Chi wanted the Holy Soul Blood Seal? I can help you refine the Saint's Soul Blood Seal, allowing you to completely absorb the remaining power within it. In that case, it might be able to help you break through to the heavenly justice realm. Ching Chi's eyes flickered as he said in a deep voice, No, I'm not willing. Just as he finished speaking, Liolio's voice came from the Saint's Soul Blood Seal, strongly objecting. Senior Ching Chi, if I completely absorb the Saint's Soul Blood Seal, what will happen to the Saint's Soul Herb Lulu? Nyetian frowned and asked cautiously. The Saint's Soul Blood Seal was formed by Lulu. Although it was a parasite on Nyetian's body, it had its own consciousness and was a living being. In the past, Lulu had saved Nyetian many times in times of crisis. Nyetian had also promised Lulu that he would find a new body for him so that he could separate from Nyetian and become a complete living being. If he completely absorbed the Saint's Soul Blood Seal, Lulu would disappear along with it. If that was the case, Nyetian could not do it. It will disappear completely. Ching Chi nodded and said in a deep voice, This. Nyetian frowned and shook his head. To him, Lulu was not only a blood seal, but also a companion. How could he sacrifice Lulu for the sake of improving his strength? Star Saint Lord, you should not be merciful at this time. He is only a parasite on you. Without you, he would have disappeared long ago. Ching Chi frowned and tried to persuade Nyetian. Senior Ching Chi, I have my own principles. Let's not talk about this again. Nyetian's eyes darkened, and he said cold. Burning the bridge after crossing the river, killing the donkey when it was no longer of use. He could not do such a thing. All right. Ching Chi sighed helplessly at Nyetian's determination. He did not say anything else. Nyetian, ask this old man about the 10 annihilations of the evil woman. At this time, Little Fat Cat's voice suddenly rang out. Nyetian was stunned, but he still looked at Ching Chi and asked, Senior Ching Chi, do you know about the 10 annihilations of the evil woman? 10 annihilations of the evil woman. Ching Chi's expression changed when he heard Nyetian mention these 4 words. He asked in shock, Saint Lord, why are you suddenly asking about this? Nyetian frowned and hesitated for a moment, but he still said, To tell you the truth, I have a friend who has the 10 destruction evil woman bloodline. Right now, her bloodline is about to awaken, but her condition isn't very good. Really? Ching Chi's eyes narrowed and his beard straightened. He let out a strange cry. Yes. Nyetian nodded. Saint Lord, can you let me have a look at that person? Ching Chi's eyes were burning with excitement and anticipation. Yes. Nyetian nodded and opened the 9 extremities. He entered with Ching Chi. Oh my God, it really is the 10 annihilations of the evil woman. Ching Chi screamed the moment he saw Rui Qinyu. His voice became extremely high-pitched. Not even in his dreams did he think he would be able to see the legendary 10 annihilations of the evil woman. Nyetian saw Ching Chi's reaction and was displeased. He did not bring Ching Chi in to see him in shock. Rui Qinyu had fallen into a coma and was quietly lying in midair as if she was asleep. Saint Lord, are you going to help her awaken the 10 annihilations of the evil woman? After a while, Ching Chi calmed down and asked Nyetian. Yes. Nyetian nodded and pointed at the array in the sky. I want to use this array to help her awaken the 10 annihilations of the evil woman. Ching Chi looked at the array in the sky and frowned. His expression became strange. He looked at the formation and then laughed out loud. I never thought that there would be someone in this world who could build such a formation. This has really opened my eyes. As he spoke, He turned around and looked at Nyetian. His eyes seemed to be hinting at something. Of course, he knew that Nyetian could not have built such a large array. There must be an expert behind it. Old man, what do you think of my array? At that moment, Fat Cat's figure appeared and landed on Nyetian's shoulder. It stared at Qing Chi curiously. So it's a nine-tailed chinchilla. No wonder. Qing Chi looked at Fat and laughed. Your array is not bad, but it's not enough to awaken the 10 annihilations of the evil woman. Chapter 39:17. Nyetian looked at Qing Chi with a startled expression. He had interacted with little Fat Cat for so long, and the latter's attainment in the Tao of formations was extremely high. He was well aware of it. He didn't expect Qing Chi to say that Fat Cat's formation was not good enough. Little Fat Cat also looked at Qing Chi in surprise, but there was a trace of anticipation in its eyes, obviously waiting for the latter to continue. The awakening of the 10 annihilation evil woman will be accompanied by a powerful blood-devouring power. This power can also be called the blood devour power. Qing Chi's gaze swept over Nyetian and Fat Cat, and he said with a faint smile, "The blood devour power is very powerful. Ordinary warriors cannot accept it." Nyetian couldn't help but frown when he heard Qing Chi mention the blood devour power. He remembered that when Rui Qinyu awakened the 9 color pupils, its side effect was that the body would produce the blood devour power. The awakening of the 10 annihilation evil woman also produced a powerful blood devour power. Were the blood devour power of the 9 color pupils and the blood devour power of the 10 annihilation evil woman the same kind of power? The 9 color pupils is a manifestation of the 10 annihilation evil woman's bloodline. At this time, Qing Chi seemed to have seen through Nyetian's thoughts and nodded slightly. However, the blood devour power produced when the 10 annihilation evil woman awakens is much stronger than the 9 color pupils. It really is the same kind of power. Nyetian's eyes slightly trembled, and he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. It seemed that the appearance of the 9 color pupils on Rui Qinyu's body was not a coincidence, but because of the 10 annihilation evil woman bloodline in her body. The 9 color pupils was only a manifestation of the 10 annihilation evil woman bloodline, just like how Nyetian, who had the demon god embryo bloodline, awakened the demon eye and heavenly punishment spirit rebel. The most important function of the formation designed by Little Chinchilla was to let the people in the formation help share the blood devour power of the 10 annihilation evil woman. But this method is very clumsy and risky. Qing Chi continued. During the process of the 10 annihilation evil woman awakening, if one person in the formation cannot bear the blood devour power, it will lead to complete failure. If one person is unable to withstand the power of the blood devouring, it will lead to complete failure. At that time, everyone in the formation will die. When Nyetian heard Qing Chi's words, he could not help but frown. His face suddenly froze, and he was momentarily speechless. He didn't think that using the formation to awaken the 10 annihilations evil woman would be so risky. He could guarantee that he could withstand the power of the blood devour, but he couldn't guarantee the same for the others. After all, the power of blood devour was terrifying. Rui Qinyu almost died from this power. The blood-devouring power produced by the awakening of the 10 annihilation evil woman was unimaginably terrifying. Ordinary people would not be able to withstand it. Just as Qing Chi said, using this method to awaken the 10 annihilation evil woman was indeed a bit clumsy. Mr. Qing Chi, what do you suggest? The fat cat looked at Qing Chi. She wasn't angry. Instead, her eyes lit up and she asked excitedly, "How much longer can she hold on?" Qing Chi looked at the unconscious Rui Qinyu and asked after a moment of silence. "More than half a month." Fat Cat nodded in response. "More than half a month." Qing Chi frowned. After pondering for a while, he said, "There should be enough time." "What time?" Nyetian looked at Qing Chi and asked with a frown. "The power of the blood devour is very unique. Apart from the body of the 10 annihilation evil lady, no other warrior can withstand it. Even the Star Saint Lord, who possesses the power of the stars, cannot withstand it. Qing-Chi looked at Nyetian and said in a deep voice, "If you want her to awaken the 10 Annihilation Evil Woman, then you have to let her suffer the 10 Annihilation Evil Woman, the blood-devouring power of the Evil Woman Destroyer." This, Nyetian furrowed his brows as his expression changed slightly. "With her strength, I'm afraid she won't be able to withstand the power of the devouring blood, right? Of course, she can't bear it alone, but if there are 9 more her to help her bear it, then there won't be a problem at all." Qing-Chi smiled faintly, a strange light flashing in his eyes. 9 of her? Nyetian was stunned. He didn't understand what Qing-Chi meant. This time, even Fat Cat was stunned. Obviously, she didn't know what Qing-Chi was thinking. "I'm going to build a large formation to absorb the power of her Saint Rune 9-color pupils." Qing-Chi smiled again and said, "Then, I'll use the power of the Saint Rune 9-color pupils to form 9 avatars." "Avatar?" Nyetian's eyes trembled violently as he couldn't help but exclaim. He never thought that such a thing could be done. "Yes, Avatar." Qing-Chi nodded with a smile. "The 9-color pupils originates from the 10 Annihilation Evil Woman. The avatars condensed from her power of the Blood Devourer are extremely strong. This way, when the 10 Annihilation Evil Woman awakens, most of the power of the Blood Devourer will be concentrated on the avatar. Her original body will be under very little pressure." "That's great." Nyetian's eyes trembled. He couldn't help but exclaim in joy. He was so excited that he almost jumped up. No matter how stupid he was, he already understood Qing-Chi's plan. Fat Cat's formation was to let other cultivators share the burden on Rui Qianyu, while Qing-Chi replaced the other cultivators with Rui Qianyu's avatars. This way, not only did the others not have to bear the risk, but it also greatly reduced the risk to Rui Qianyu. This was because her avatar's ability to withstand the power of the Blood Devourer was much stronger than other cultivators. One had to admit that Qing-Chi was really a genius. It seemed that his research on formations was even better than Fat Cat's. "Mr. Qing-Chi is indeed a master. I admire you." After a while, Fat Cat smiled faintly and bowed slightly to Qing-Chi, as if she was humbly asking for advice. "Mr. Chinchilla is too polite." Qing-Chi laughed heartily, but he was indescribably happy. It was very rare to be praised by a 9-tailed chinchilla. "Mr. Qing-Chi, if I'm not mistaken, the protective formation and protective boundary of Vast Cloud Sacred City were also designed by you, right?" Then, Fat Cat looked at Qing-Chi and said with a faint smile, "Mr. Chinchilla has a good eye. The protective boundary and protective boundary of Vast Cloud Sacred City were completed by my Wan Yuan Pavilion." Qing-Chi laughed with a proud look on his face. He said, "The framework of the entire protective boundary and great formation was designed by me. As for the real construction and completion, it was done by the disciples of Wan Yuan Pavilion." "Of course. Mr. Qing-Chi has good means. I admire you." Fat Cat bowed again. This time, even the way he addressed himself had changed. Nyetian was stunned on the spot and couldn't react for a long time. Before he entered Vast Cloud's Sacred City, he had already sensed the power of the protective boundary and protective great formation. It was a kind of power that he couldn't imagine at present. Chapter 39:18. Nyetian had never thought that Qing-Chi would be the one to set up the protective barriers and formations of Vast Cloud City. He stared at Qing-Chi for a very long time, and his stunned expression finally eased up. It was no wonder Fat Cat was so polite to Qing-Chi. As it turned out, he already knew about this. Fat Cat had always been very proud of his mastery over formations and barriers. This was the first time Nyetian had seen him lower his head before someone else. "Mr. Qing-Chi, the business of your Myriad Yuan Pavilion should be the construction of protective formations and barriers for the cities of the various saints' world, right?" Fat Cat's eyes could not help but flicker as he asked rather excitedly. "That's right." Qing-Chi did not deny it. He nodded and laughed aloud. "Basically, half of the protective formations and barriers in the entire All-Heaven Saints world come from our Myriad Yuan Pavilion." This, Nyetian was stunned. He suddenly felt his throat sink, and he was unable to say anything. As soon as he entered the Myriad Yuan Pavilion, he was extremely curious about what such a mysterious place was for. Originally, he guessed that it should be a place similar to an auction or market. Only now did he know that the Myriad Yuan Pavilion was much more advanced than an auction or market. Auctions sold all sorts of items, while the Myriad Yuan Pavilion sold the protective measures of a city. It was no wonder that the interior of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion was so mysterious. The presence of various formations and barriers interweaved together. It was extremely complicated and impossible to break through. Tian guessed that just the formations inside the Myriad Yuan Pavilion were extremely terrifying. Even a formation master like Fat Cat would need a very long time to break through them. Mr. Qing Chi is truly a genius of the present age. Your attainments in formations and barriers can be said to be number one in the present age. Little Fat Cat reacted and said solemnly to Qing Chi, "You're too kind, Mr. Chinchilla." Qing Chi was very modest. He smiled faintly. "I wouldn't dare to call myself the greatest in the world, but I don't think anyone can match up to my defensive skills and formations." Fat Cat nodded heavily, obviously agreeing with him. A burning light flashed through Qing Chi's eyes. He was clearly overjoyed. He said, "Although my Myriad Yuan Pavilion doesn't seem like much, it's known as one of the safest places in the Saints' world. Without my permission, even those peak Sky Marshal Saint Ancestor powerhouses cannot step into the 10,000 Yuan Pavilion. Step. So powerful." Tian's eyes trembled slightly, and he couldn't help but exclaim, "Hee hee." Qing Chi glanced at Tian and said with a smile, "The Myriad Origin Pavilion's protective spell formation can defend against the attacks of 10 peak Heavenly Martial Sacred Ancestors at the same time. As for the spell formation inside, it can kill those peak Heavenly Martial Sacred Ancestors instantly." This, Tian gulped and sucked in a breath of cold air. So it turned out that the Myriad Yuan Pavilion they entered was actually such a terrifying place. Fortunately, EMO had that token. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to enter the Myriad Essence Pavilion at all. At that moment, Tian finally understood how terrifying Star Lord Qing Chi, who was standing in front of him, was. In a way, Qing Chi was stronger than the Scarlet Life, Loyal Heart, and Tian Sha. "Sacred Leader, don't worry. In the future, the 10,000 Yuan Pavilion will be open to you at any time." At that moment, Qing Chi laughed and took out a token. He handed it to Tian and said, "This is the 10,000 Yuan Holy Token. With this token, you can enter any place in the 10,000 Yuan Pavilion freely." "Thank you, Senior." Tian's eyes lit up, and he took the 10,000 Yuan Holy Token without hesitation. He glanced at the 10,000 Yuan Holy Token. It was different from the token that EMO had taken out previously. It should be a token of a different level. With the 10,000 Yuan Holy Token, Tian felt much more at ease. As expected, it was much more comfortable to deal with Qing Chi than with White Tiger Star-Lord. "Sacred Leader, for the next period of time, I need to focus on building the formation to absorb this Lady's Eye power. At the same time, I need to perfect the 10 Annihilation Evil Woman Awakening formation." Then, Qing Chi calmed down and looked at Tian. "If possible, I want to complete the formation in the 9 Superbs. Can we form a grand formation?" Of course, of course." Tian's eyes lit up and he nodded repeatedly. With Qing Chi's help, there should be no problem for Rui Qingyu to awaken the 10 Annihilation Evil Woman. "Sacred Leader, let me ask you again. Regarding your breakthrough, do you still want to reconsider?" Qing Chi looked at Tian and asked in a deep voice. "It's all right. I can think of a way to break through myself." Tian smiled faintly and rejected again. If his breakthrough came at the cost of Liolio's disappearance, he would rather not break through at all. "All right." Qing Chi shook his head helplessly. "I hope that old bite doesn't take it too seriously. Anyway, that thing is already in my hands. Why not just give it to you?" "What is it?" Hearing Qing Chi's words, Tian couldn't help but frown and ask with excitement. When the White Tiger Star-Lord came to find him, he sensed that the other party had something to give him. However, His answer made the White Tiger Star Lord very dissatisfied. The latter left angrily and gave him a 5-day appointment. Qingqi looked at Nietian and sighed softly. Actually, it's nothing much. Back then, Old Bai was entrusted by the former Starry Sky sacred leader to search for the item that could lift the seal on the 4th star mark. After much effort, Lao Bai finally found that thing. But when he came back, he found that thing. However, when he returned, the former Starry Sky sacred leader had already passed away. Later, Old Bai took that thing and hid from place to place. He avoided being hunted down countless times before he finally settled down. All these years, he has been carrying that thing with him, waiting for the next Starry Sky sacred leader to appear. Now that you are here, he is so harsh. I really don't understand. After saying that, Qingqi smiled bitterly. He was clearly very helpless towards the White Tiger Star Lord. Maybe I have disappointed Senior White Tiger. Nietian smiled bitterly. He was also helpless. That's because he doesn't know that you came from the lowest plane world, Qingqi said angrily. He felt that it was unfair to Nietian. The White Tiger Star Lord might have thought that Nietian was originally from the Sacred Realm, but his cultivation was only at the 9th tier of the Heavenly Mandate Realm, which was too weak. However, Qingqi could see that Nietian came from the lowest plane world step by step. Therefore, his talent was no weaker than the top geniuses of the Sacred Realm. Senior Qingqi, what is the thing that can lift the seal on the 4th star mark? Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly. He could not help but ask. He knew that the thing that could lift the seal on the 4th star mark must be something with great space-time power. Qingqi frowned and hesitated for a moment. However, he still said 4 words, Singularity of the Universe. Chapter 39:19. When Nietian heard the name Universe Singularity, he couldn't help but be puzzled. This name was indeed a bit strange, and he was a little puzzled. He already knew that the 4th star mark Dark Seal needed a space-time attribute item to unseal it, and it needed an item that contained an extremely large amount of space-time energy to be able to unseal it. When Nietian encountered the space-time scar in the net of the sacred world, it had made the star-marked Dark Seal extremely active, but the power of the space-time scar was still not enough to awaken the 4th star-marked Dark Seal. Could it be that the universe singularity contained an extremely large amount of space-time energy? Sacred Lord, I don't know much about the universe singularity, but this thing can't be casually exposed now. If Blackroot's people sense it, it will be troublesome. Qingqi didn't explain too much to Nietian, but said with a worried expression. Blackroot. When Nietian heard this name, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. And you on Blackroot? Huh? Qingqi looked at Nietian, and his reaction was even more surprised. You know Yuan Blackroot? He obviously didn't expect that Nietian would know about Yuan Blackroot. Yuan Blackroot was a mysterious force hidden in the sacred world. Even among the various experts in the sacred world, very few people knew about the existence of such a force. However, Qingqi had some understanding of Yuan Blackroot, and he knew how terrifying this force was. In his opinion, Yuan Blackroot's true strength was most likely even more terrifying than the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion. I know a little. Nietian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he said, when I was in the realm, I once met Yuan Blackroot's people, and they seemed to be very interested in my origin spirit. In the realm, Nietian had used the 9 extreme chaos beast, and it ended up attracting Yuan Blackroot's people. He still remembered that Yuan Blackroot's person was called Demon Sealing Bimming. He even knew that the power used by Yuan Blackroot's people was completely different from other warriors, and it was the power of Yuan Blackroot's attribute. Your origin spirit? When Qingqi heard Nietian's words, his eyes couldn't help but narrow, and he seemed a little nervous. Yuan Blackroot was a terrifying force, so why would they be interested in a warrior's origin spirit? Could it be that Nietian's primordial spirit was different from other martial artists? Great Saint Lord, you can't tell anyone about this. Qingqi suppressed the curiosity in his heart and didn't ask anything. Instead, he solemnly warned Nietian. Tian nodded. Of course, he could keep his own secret. If it weren't for the fact that Qi was absolutely trustworthy, he wouldn't have told her about this matter. In fact, he wanted to know more about Yuan Heigen from Qi's mouth, but the latter didn't ask much. Obviously, he didn't want to say too much. Qi looked at Tian and said solemnly, "Sacred Lord, let's wait for White to tell you about the universe singularity. It is said that Yuan Heigen's people are also looking for the universe singularity. If White appears in a few days, you must tell him to be careful." Okay. Tian nodded and said, "Senior Qi, please take care of Rui Qinyu. Don't worry, great Saint Lord. I will definitely let her successfully awaken the 10 annihilation evil woman." Qi laughed. His eyes were filled with excitement. He also wanted to see just how strong the legendary 10 annihilation evil woman was. Then Qi told Tian some things and went out for a while to get the things needed to build the array. He then stayed in 9 extremes and focused on building the array. After Tian left 9 extremes, he directly left the strange space in front of him. "Young master, please follow me." As soon as he left the room, the steward who had been waiting outside said respectfully when he saw Tian come out, "Thank you." Tian nodded and smiled. If the steward didn't lead the way, he might get lost in 10,000 yuan pavilion. After a while, Tian returned to the room. "Tian, you're back." Seeing that Tian had returned, Emo and the others let out a sigh of relief. They had been worried that something might have happened to Tian. Tian smiled faintly. Qi helped him solve the problem of Rui Qinyu, so he was in a good mood. Then, everyone waited quietly in the room. After half a day, the door opened again and the steward appeared again. "Is the teacher here?" Emo had been waiting for a long time. He asked hurriedly when he saw the steward. "Young master, the person you're waiting for has arrived in Haoyun Sacred City. He sent someone to deliver this." The steward smiled faintly and handed a scroll to Emo. Emo's eyes were burning. He took the scroll and sensed it. He couldn't help but smile and said, "The teacher and Qingwan are here. They're at Haoyun Auction House and asked us to go there." "Okay, let's go." Tian smiled faintly. He hadn't seen Qingwan for a long time, and he missed her very much. They didn't delay and immediately left for Haoyun Auction House. Soon, they left 10,000 yuan pavilion. Boom! But right when they'd just arrived outside the myriad yuan pavilion, a violent energy suddenly appeared and pressed over with a bang. Huh? Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. He took a step forward and released his sword momentum, shattering the violent force impact. "You blind dog, get lost." Just as he stood still, a violent low roar sounded. Then, another terrifying aura appeared and pressed over. Tian's face darkened. The sword intent surged around him, and the terrifying aura shattered the force impact again. This time, his cold eyes sank. He saw an angry figure standing right in front of him. This person looked very young and handsome, but his eyes were ruthless and murderous. His expression seemed a little ferocious. "Sir, you're so angry." Tian looked at that person and couldn't help but frown. He said coldly, "You dog, why didn't you get lost when you saw me? Are you blind?" That person glanced at Tian and roared violently. "The road is so wide. Am I blocking your way?" Tian's face darkened, and he replied coldly, "You dog, how dare you talk to me like that? Do you want to die?" That person shouted. Then his aura surged crazily. He was going to attack for real. Tian's eyes darkened. If this person really attacked, he wouldn't mind teaching him a lesson that he wouldn't forget. Originally, he was quite happy and didn't want to be entangled with this person. But this guy was too arrogant. He couldn't stand it anymore. "Young Master Guan, stop." At this moment, an anxious voice was heard. Then a figure appeared in the air and landed between Tian and young Master Guan, blocking the two of them. Chapter 39:20. The steward didn't expect that young Master Guan would attack him. He was surprised. Bang! In the next moment, a muffled sound was heard. The steward was sent flying, and blood was everywhere in the air. Tian frowned. He stepped forward and caught the steward. But young Master Guan's attack was too heavy. The steward's whole body was bloody. He was seriously injured. Damn it! Nietion's expression flickered as he let out a low roar. Then, he released a surge of energy to help stabilize the steward's aura. After all, the steward was a member of the 10,000 yuan pavilion. This young Master Guan was too arrogant. He dared to hurt a member of the 10,000 yuan pavilion. Fortunately, Nietion acted in time and saved the steward's life. The steward wasn't strong. He was only in the 9th tier of the heavenly mandate realm. He shouldn't be a martial artist. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to enter the 10,000 yuan pavilion. Die, you bastard! At this moment, young Master Guan let out another roar. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he violently struck out with his palm towards Nietion. Get lost! Nietion's eyes suddenly darkened. He growled like a wild beast. Suddenly, a strong sword force surged out. It swept over everything like a violent wave. Bang! Young Master Guan didn't have time to react. He was sent flying. After he landed, he left a bloody trail on the bluestone ground. You puff. Young Master Guan stabilized himself with great difficulty. His eyes were full of horror. He looked up at Nietion. Just as he was about to speak, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Say one more word, and I'll kill you. Nietion's eyes were incomparably cold as he spat out word by word. Young Master Guan was so scared that his eyes were trembling. He opened his mouth wide as if he wanted to say something, but no sound came out. He could feel Nietion's murderous intent. If he spoke again, the latter would really kill him. Pooh! At this moment, Nietion took a step forward. Suddenly, a sharp sword intent gushed out. Before young Master Guan could react, half of his face was already bloody. A glaring sword mark was engraved on his face. Young Master Guan suddenly reacted and screamed in horror, but he didn't dare to hand it over. He could not believe that Nietion had actually left a sword mark on his face. This sword mark is a lesson for you. I want you to remember today, and remember me. Nietion's eyes were cold as he spoke. Young Master Guan was shocked. His lips were twitching, but he didn't dare to make sound. What happened? At that moment, a low voice rang out, following which, 2 black-robed figures descended. Instantly, a terrifying pressure descended. It was as if a mountain was pressing down on everyone. Nietion resisted the pressure and turned around to look at the 2 black-robed figures. These 2 people were clearly experts. They should be the guards of the Wan Yuan Pavilion. It's okay, it's okay. It's just a misunderstanding. At this moment, the steward's aura stabilized. He quickly waved his hand at the 2 guards. The 2 guards' faces were gloomy, but their auras were much more restrained. You two, bring young Master Guan in first. The steward endured the pain and nodded. Yes. The 2 guards answered and walked to young Master Guan's side. Young Master Guan was not afraid when he saw the guards of the Wan Yuan Pavilion. Instead, the shock on his face was replaced by viciousness. He stared at Nietion coldly and said in a deep voice, You dog, this matter between us is not over. I promise you that you will never leave Clear Cloud, Sacred City alive. Is that so? Then I'll wait for your promise. Tianling laughed with disdain. He did not expect that this young Master Guan was also a member of the Wan Yuan Pavilion. Moreover, from the steward's attitude towards him, it seemed that his status was not low. Otherwise, this steward would not speak up for him when he was so heavily injured. Bastard, I will kill you with my own hands. Young Master Guan threatened coldly. Then, he walked towards the Wan Yuan Pavilion under the protection of 2 guards. I didn't expect the Wan Yuan Pavilion to have such a person. Nietion watched young Master Guan enter the Wan Yuan Pavilion and could not help but shake his head with a bitter smile. Thank you for saving us, young master. At this moment, the steward looked at Nietion and sincerely bowed to thank him. Steward, you are too polite. You are the one who helped us. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to get rid of that young master. Nietion smiled faintly. After confirming that the steward's life was no longer in danger, he was relieved. He could not help but ask, Steward, this guy called young Master Guan. Who is he? A human? Sigh. The steward sighed and seemed to be very dissatisfied. He said, His name is Guan Quan, the son of Master Guan Shao. He is usually doted on by Master Guan Shao, so he has developed a domineering personality. None of the stewards of our 10,000 yuan pavilion are not afraid of him. After saying this, the steward smiled bitterly with a helpless expression. Master Guan Shao? Nye Tian went blank for a moment and frowned. Who is he? Oh, Master Guan Shao is Master Qing Qi's direct disciple. His status in the Wan Yuan Pavilion is extremely high, second only to Master Qing Qi and his several senior brothers. Who can afford to offend his son? The steward only now remembered that Nye Tian did not know anything and patiently explained. Is Senior Qing Qi's disciple so arrogant? Nye Tian could not help but laugh when he heard the steward's words. He actually had a look of disdain on his face. Of course, the person he was looking down on was not Qing Qi, but his third disciple, Guan Shao. Raising a son like this, Guan Shao, as a father, was not much better. At this time, thinking of Guan Quan's ruthless words, Nye Tian felt funny. If Guan Quan knew his relationship with Qing Qi, he did not know if he would dare to say such words. Speaking of which, Guan Quan was Qing Qi's disciple's disciple, but the person he met was the person above Qing Qi. If Guan Quan acted recklessly and still wanted to take revenge on Nye Tian, he would be in for a lot of trouble. Guan Quan likes to compete with others for women. Just now, he was so angry because he couldn't win against others. Unfortunately, you and I encountered each other. I can only accept my bad luck. The steward shook his head and said helplessly, Okay. Nye Tian felt funny, but still nodded. Young master, you must be careful. Guan Quan is not to be trifled with. It's better to avoid him. The steward was kind and did not forget to remind Nye Tian before leaving. Thank you for the reminder. Nye Tian smiled faintly and did not stay any longer. He turned around and left with EMO and the others. After a while, Nye Tian and the others arrived at the vast cloud auction house. What a magnificent auction house! Jun Jianxing and the others could not help but exclaim when they saw the auction house in front of them. Nye Tian looked at the magnificent building in front of him and was also amazed. Among all the auction houses he had seen, there was no auction house that could compare to the one in front of him. The core city of a top holy world was indeed not comparable to other holy worlds. Kid, I didn't expect you to come too. We are really fated. Just as Nye Tian was about to enter the auction house, a very familiar voice sounded in his divine sense, which stunned him. Chapter 39:21. Nye Tian suddenly heard the voice of the divine soul in the evil heart of evil and couldn't help but cry out in surprise. He didn't think that this guy would actually appear here. Little kid, we are really fated. The voice sounded again, with a hint of playfulness and ridicule. Where are you? Nye Tian frowned, and his expression changed. He tried to sense the source of the voice. There seemed to be an aura, and it wasn't just the aura of the divine soul, but also the aura of life. Could it be that the evil soul already had a body? You go into the auction house first. I'll come back to find you after I finish my business. The voice laughed and then disappeared. Nye Tian's eyebrows furrowed, confusion filling his face. He still didn't know who this mysterious person was. This person was hiding in the evil heart of evil, so his origin must be extraordinary. He was curious whether this person was still hiding in the evil heart of evil, or if he had already escaped the control of the evil heart and had his own body. If this person was still hiding in the evil heart of evil, then the Holy Son of Evil should also be here. Thinking of the Holy Son of Evil, Nye Tian's eyes flashed with a hint of killing intent. Last time, if it wasn't for the divine soul stopping him, he would have already killed the Holy Son of Evil. Emo saw that Nye Tian's expression was strange, but he didn't ask anything and just said with a faint smile, Nye Tian, let's go in. Okay. Nye Tian agreed and entered the auction house with everyone. After entering the auction house, Emo directly went to the 4th floor. After a while, everyone came to a place where there weren't many people. It seemed to be the VIP area. The entire auction house was noisy, but this area was relatively quiet. Nye Tian, let's wait for a while. Teacher and the others will be here soon. Emo smiled faintly, but his eyes were constantly observing his surroundings. Clearly, he was looking for something. Niet Tion wasn't in a hurry and began to look around. From their area, they could see the entire auction house perfectly, and the field of vision was wide and very clear. At this moment, an auction was taking place on the auction stage in the center, and the people below were bidding like a raging fire. Niet Tion did not care about the auction. Instead, he carefully observed his surroundings. Not long after, Niet Tion's expression changed slightly, revealing a pleasantly surprised smile. He sensed a familiar aura. Teacher and the others are here. At this moment, Emo laughed and said excitedly. Niet Tion suddenly turned around and saw an old man in black walking towards them. Behind him, a beautiful young girl followed closely. It was Niet Qingwan. The familiar aura he sensed just now was Niet Qingwan's aura. Niet Tion. Seeing Niet Tion, Niet Qingwan's watery eyes trembled slightly, and she shouted in surprise. Qingwan, you've grown up. Niet Tion looked at Niet Qingwan and couldn't help but recall the scene when he first met her. The corners of his mouth raised into a smile, and his heart immediately warmed. At that time, Niet Qingwan was still a little girl, and now she had grown into a big girl. It had to be said that although Niet Qingwan had grown up a lot, her face looked more delicate, like a young girl. In fact, this was not surprising. Many warriors, especially those with great talent and strength, could maintain their appearance similar to that of a young boy and girl, even if they were hundreds of thousands of years old. Moreover, Niet Qingwan was not old to begin with. Immediately, Niet Qingwan came to Niet Tion's side, her beautiful eyes shining, and she giggled. Niet Tion, our strength is finally on the same level. Niet Tion's eyes narrowed slightly, and his divine consciousness swept over Niet Qingwan. He was suddenly shocked on the spot. He couldn't believe that Niet Qingwan's strength was actually in the 9th level of the heavenly mandate realm. Previously in the territory, Niet Qingwan was still a little girl, and her strength was completely incomparable to Niet Tion in all aspects. Who would have thought that a few years later, Niet Qingwan would actually catch up to Niet Tion? Moreover, Niet Tion sensed a very unique bloodline aura in Niet Qingwan's body. This bloodline aura was very strong. Although it was not as strong as the holy light martial intent of the super genius of the Angel of Light, it contained a pure aura. It was very strange. Niet Qingwan's bloodline was unusual. Half of it was the spirit prohibition power of the Nye family, and the other half was the bloodline power of the Angel of Light. Back in the territory, Niet Tion knew that Niet Qingwan was the strongest possessor of the spirit prohibition bloodline in the Nye family, so she could integrate the power of the beginning light realm. Now it seemed that the bloodline power of the Angel of Light in Niet Qingwan's body was equally strong. Niet Tion even felt that the two bloodline powers in Niet Qingwan's body should have some kind of fusion, so her Angel of Light aura was different from the holy light martial intent. Is this the Niet Tion you were talking about? At this time, the black-robed old man came over, his eyes staring straight at Niet Tion with a look of disbelief. Yes. Niet Qingwan nodded heavily and said with a smile, Teacher, Niet Tion is more talented than me, and don't underestimate him. Is that so? The black-robed old man's mouth twitched. He had a fake smile on his face. Obviously, he did not believe it. At this moment, Niet Tion looked at the black-robed old man in front of him. He was stunned as if he had been petrified, and he could not react for a long time. Seeing Niet Tion's reaction, Niet Qingwan and Emo could not help but ask in unison, Niet Tion, are you okay? Looking at Niet Tion's reaction, it was as if he knew their teacher. I am fine. Niet Tion finally came back to his senses and forced a smile. However, his eyes were still filled with unconcealable shock. Boy, do we know each other? The black-robed old man looked at Niet Tion and could not help but ask in surprise. No, I don't. Niet Tion calmed down and said with a faint smile. He indeed did not know the black-robed old man in front of him, but he knew what the latter's identity was. He saw a black mark on the black-robed old man's forehead, and this mark was the mark of the Beacon Emperor. Back when Niet Tion had met Lung Shuang Wuchen, the sect master of the Heaven Conduit Fate sect, Not only had the latter helped emerge with the Heaven Conway incantation, but he had also given him the Imperial Jade Seal, the sect's most precious treasure. The Beacon Sky Fate sect had 2 great sect masters, for flag masters, and 8 protectors. They were known as the 2 sects, for flags, and 8 protectors. Only these few people's divine sense marks were imprinted on the Beacon Emperor Imperial Jade Seal. As the owner of the Beacon Emperor Imperial Jade Seal, if Nyetian saw the 2 sects, for flags, and 8 protectors, he would be able to see their Beacon Emperor Imperial Jade Seal at a glance. When Lung Shuang Wuchen gave the Beacon Emperor Imperial Jade Seal to Nyetian, he obviously wanted to use this method to protect him. Chapter 39:22. Nyetian was so shocked because he saw the Beacon Emperor's mark. He was very curious about who this Elder in Black was among the 2 sects, for banners and 8 protectors. However, with his strength, he still couldn't sense the Elder's true strength, so he couldn't deduce his identity. Kid, have we really never met before? The black-robed old man frowned as he looked at Nyetian. He seemed to have sensed that something was amiss and asked again. Senior, I'm very sure that this is our first time meeting. Nyetian smiled and nodded. At this moment, he didn't want to reveal his identity. Sai, whatever. The Elder in Black frowned deeply. In the end, he simply waved his hand and didn't think about anything else. He sensed a familiar aura in Nyetian's body, but he wasn't sure. Teacher, where did you go? Why did you only appear now? Emo looked at the Elder in Black and asked curiously. Brat, do you think that thing is easy to get? The black-clothed old man said with a displeased expression. For that thing, this old man almost lost his life. I see. Thank you for your hard work, teacher. Emo smiled awkwardly and said embarrassedly. Then, they stayed in the auction house for a while, but didn't see anything interesting. Nyetian kept talking with Emo and the others. They talked about their own things in recent years. What kind of bullsh asterisk tea auction is this? There's nothing good. Boring. After half a day, Emo and Nyechingwan's teacher, Guling Wuji, seemed to be annoyed. He said unhappily, Let's go. Where to? Emo looked at Guling Wuji with a puzzled expression. To the 9th floor, of course. Guling Wuji chuckled and said, Do you think I would come here for no reason? Emo was stunned. He didn't know why Guling Wuji came to the auction house. Let's go. I'll show you what you want. Guling Wuji chuckled and walked to the 9th floor of the auction house. Nyetian and the others didn't say much and immediately followed. After a while, Nyetian and the others arrived at the highest floor of the auction house, the 9th floor. The auction house on the 9th floor was different from the auction houses below. There was no hall here, only a VIP room and a huge auction stage. At this moment, 2 masked cultivators were fighting on the auction stage. Furthermore, it was an extremely bloody battle. There were no large fluctuations on the auction stage. The 2 martial artists were fighting fiercely. They were competing on their martial bodies. When Nyetian saw this, his eyes narrowed and his expression changed. He said in a cold tone, Is this an auction or a martial arts arena? It's about the same. Guling Wuchi smiled bitterly and said, This is the highest level of the vast cloud auction house. Of course, the items being auctioned here are not ordinary. Instead, there are some talented cultivators. Look at the 2 warriors on the stage. They are both martial slaves. This is a battle of life and death. If they lose, they will be killed immediately. What if I win? Nyetian frowned and asked in a deep voice. Even if I win, I won't be able to escape death. Guling Wuchi shook his head and said, There is a powerful restriction on the auction stage that oppresses the yuan meridians of these martial slaves, forcing them to fight with their flesh and blood. This kind of battle will reveal the bloodline power of a martial slave. Nyetian's expression was gloomy. He asked in a cold tone, Those martial slaves who win will be bought and nurtured, right? Hee. Guling Wuchi looked at Nyetian and smiled strangely. He said, You are too naive. Those martial slaves will end up worse than those who lose. They will indeed be bought, but they will not be used for nurturing. They will be used to refine bloodline elixirs. Bloodline elixirs? When Nyetian heard these words, his expression sank. He asked in a cold voice. What do you mean? Guling Wuchi frowned and paused for a moment, but he still explained. If these martial slaves win, it proves that their bloodline power is very strong, and they are worth it. They will be bought, and then the people at the auction house will forcibly absorb their bloodline power and refine them into special bloodline elixirs. And the people who buy them want the bloodline elixirs. After consuming this bloodline elixir, apart from increasing one's strength, it can also increase one's bloodline power. Those people are after the bloodline power of these martial slaves. After saying this, Guling Wuchi could not help but sigh. So that's how it is. Nie Tian's expression sank after hearing Guling Wuchi's words, and his eyes turned cold. These people are too vicious. They actually use the bloodline power of others to refine elixirs. Isn't this a human elixir? Using humans to refine elixirs. This method is devoid of humanity. Die. At that moment, a low roar came from the auction house. A martial slave punched out and sent another martial slave flying. The martial slave twitched a few times on the ground, then stopped moving. He died a horrible death on the auction stage. Following this, a martial artist in green clothes appeared on the auction stage and announced loudly, "Everyone, you can start bidding." Following this, the people in the VIP rooms started bidding against each other. Finally, the martial slave was taken away from the auction house. These people are simply inhuman. Nie Tian's eyes were dark, and his face was stern. Young man, this is the world of martial arts. The strong rule. This will never change. Guling Wuchi looked at Nie Tian and smiled bitterly. Even if you are dissatisfied with some things, you can only watch. Nie Tian's face was dark, and he clenched his fists tightly. His strength was too weak, and he did not have the ability to change all the injustices in this world. However, even though he was used to seeing life and death, he still found it hard to accept the human core before him. Senior, don't tell me you're here for the bloodline elixir as well. At that moment, Nie Tian looked at Guling Wuchi, and a cold light flashed in his eyes as he asked coldly, I told you, you can't change anything. Guling Wuchi replied coldly when he sensed Nie Tian's hostility. Nie Tian's eyes were cold, and his face was extremely cold. He was speechless for a long time. So what if Guling Wuchi was here for the human core? Even if Guling Wuchi did not win these martial slaves, they would be won by others. At that moment, the martial artist in green clothes on the auction stage announced loudly and excitedly, Everyone, this is the most important moment of the night. Let's welcome the Rebel Dragon Physique. Reverse Dragon Physique? Nie Tian's expression flickered, and his eyes flickered when he heard these words. The Rebel Dragon Physique is here. At the same time, Guling Wuchi's eyes narrowed as he exclaimed in surprise. He had come here for the Rebel Dragon Physique. Chapter 39:23. An eye jamming. The moment Nie Tian saw the crimson figure on the auction stage, his eyes widened and his face froze for a few seconds. He had never imagined that the person he saw would be sacred leader Xianlong. An eye jamming. An eye jamming. Why is he here? How did he become a martial slave? Why is he so badly injured? Nie Tian's eyes widened and his body trembled slightly. At that moment, it was as if a ball of fire was dancing in his heart, making him feel like he was about to explode and go crazy. At the same time, on the auction stage, N.I. Jamming's hands and feet were shackled and his shoulder blades were pierced by 2 chains, preventing him from unleashing the power in his body. However, his eyes were still as resolute as ever. His scarlet-red eyes were filled with unyielding anger. He stared at the green-robed martial artist on the auction stage like a beast about to devour him. N.I. Jamming. Nie Tian looked at N.I. Jamming from afar, but he could sense the determination in the latter's eyes and the anger in his heart. His expression changed, and the blood in his body was about to boil. Nie Tian, what's wrong? At that moment, EMO sensed that something was wrong with Nie Tian's expression and asked in shock, I want to save him. Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and he let out a deep roar. He then stomped his feet and was about to fly onto the auction stage. However, just as his body left the ground, an extremely powerful force suddenly appeared and enveloped his entire body, causing him to be unable to move at all. Nietion's eyes darkened, and he suddenly turned around. He stared at Guling Wuji and said in a cold voice, "Don't stop me. Is this Ni jamming your friend?" Guling Wuji asked in a deep voice with a stern expression. "I said, don't stop me." Nietion's eyes were cold as he spoke again. His aura continued to rise as he tried to break free from Guling Wuji's pressure. Unfortunately, Guling Wuji's strength was far beyond his imagination. No matter how hard he tried, he could not break free from the powerful restraints around him. "Nietion, don't be rash." Guling Wuji's face sank. He seemed to have noticed something from Nietion and said, "You must calm down if you really want to save them. Do you think that with your strength, you can directly snatch people from the auction house?" Haoyan Auction House had the backing of a major faction. There were countless experts protecting the entire auction house. Not to mention a heavenly mandate Saint Master like Nietion. Even a peak-level Sky Marshal Saint Ancestor wouldn't be able to snatch someone from the Haoyan Auction House easily. If Nietion were to make a move now, the most direct and most likely outcome would be that he would be killed. Moreover, the person who would kill him wouldn't even need to show his face. In front of a true powerhouse, Nietion was simply too weak. He was simply an ant-like existence. Nietion looked at Guling Wuji. His blood-red eyes gradually became clear, and he became much calmer. Guling Wuji was right. With his strength, it was impossible for him to snatch people from the Haoyan Auction House. At this moment, Nietion looked at Guling Wuji and said in a deep voice, "I want you to help me save him." "Huh?" Guling Wuji was stunned and said coldly, "Why?" He could stop Nietion from doing stupid things, but it didn't mean that he would help Nietion save people. Moreover, it wasn't that easy to save people from the Haoyan Auction House. "I'm not begging you. I'm ordering you," Nietion said coldly. This. Emo and Nieqingwan were stunned when they saw this. They wanted to say something, but they didn't know what to say. They didn't expect the situation to suddenly turn out like this. It was strange that Nietion's attitude had suddenly become so tough. "Ordering me?" Guling Wuji sneered. However, the smile on his face froze in the next moment. He looked at Nietion with trembling eyes and exclaimed, "You're really—" He didn't say the last two words, "Beacon Emperor." Previously, he had sensed an unusual aura on Nietion's body. It seemed to be the aura of the heavenly beacon art. At this moment, the aura of the heavenly beacon art on Nietion's body was becoming more and more obvious. The heavenly beacon art was a fate art that only the Beacon Emperor of the Fontian Fate sect could integrate. As long as one integrated the fate art, they would be the Beacon Emperor of the Fontian Fate sect. Guling Wuji would never have dreamed that the silver-haired young man in front of him would be the new Beacon Emperor of the Fontian Fate sect. "I saw the Beacon Emperor's mark on your forehead. You should know very well what kind of person I am. So my words are in order to you." Nietion's eyes darkened. Guling Wuji was stunned, and he did not know what to say. "Nietion, what's going on?" Emo, who was watching from the side, could not help but step forward and ask. Nietion ignored him. His eyes were fixed on Guling Wuji as he waited for Guling Wuji's answer. Guling Wuji finally snapped out of his daze and bowed respectfully towards Nietion. "Yes, sir." Nietion nodded slightly, but his face was still tense. Although Guling Wuji had promised to save him, he might not have the ability to do so. This. Emo, Nieqingwan, and the others were completely stunned. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. How could they have imagined that Guling Wuji would call himself a subordinate in front of Nietion? What the hell was going on? Who exactly was Nietion? "Sir, you must remain calm. You must not be impulsive." Guling Wuji calmed down, but his eyes were filled with joy. Nietion's sudden appearance had shocked him, but he was even more delighted. The Fontian Fate sect finally had a new Beacon Emperor. How could he not be happy? However, the matter in front of him was indeed very tricky. Even with his status, it would not be easy to save a martial slave from the Haoyan Auction House. Most importantly, this martial slave had the legendary rebel dragon physique. It was easy to imagine how many big shots were eyeing this powerful mortal core. I'll do whatever it takes to save him. Nyetian looked at Ni Jiaming. His calm voice was filled with determination. Guling Wuji's heart trembled when he sensed Nyetian's determination. He had not expected the rebel dragon physique to be so important to Nyetian. Chapter 39-24. Blood Calamity Martial Slave. Nyetian looked at the shocked Guling Wuji and couldn't help but ask, "What do you mean?" Judging from Guling Wuji's reaction, it seemed that the Blood Calamity Martial Slave was a very scary thing. Guling Wuji's eyes slightly trembled. His expression was still shocked as he said, "No wonder he has no opponents. He's a Blood Calamity Martial Slave." "What do you mean?" Nyetian's eyes darkened as he asked again. The Blood Calamity Martial Slave only targets martial slaves with extremely high bloodline power. Such martial slaves will not be matched with opponents, but will undergo the Blood Calamity test. Guling Wuji's face darkened as he said in a deep voice, "What is the Blood Tribulation test?" Nyetian's eyes flickered as he continued to ask. The Blood Tribulation test is a special kind of bloodline test. It uses the power of the Blood Tribulation to test the power of the martial slave's bloodline. Guling Wuji seemed to be somewhat nervous. He took a deep breath and said, "The power of the Blood Calamity is extremely harmful to the martial body of a cultivator. The stronger the bloodline of the martial slave, the more power of the Blood Calamity they can endure. In the end, it will be sold at a higher price." At this point, Guling Wuji raised his head and glanced at Nyetian before he said carefully, "Most of the Blood Calamity martial slaves will die on the auction stage." "Damn it!" Nyetian's gaze turned cold, and he couldn't help but growl like a wild beast. The situation that Ni Jiaming was facing was worse than he had imagined. "Everyone, watch carefully. The Blood Tribulation test is about to begin." At this moment, the steward spoke again. His eyes were cold and vicious as he stared fixedly at Ni Jiaming and said, "Brat, let me see how many strands of Blood Tribulation force your rebel dragon physique can endure." Ni Jiaming's eyes were scarlet red. He stared coldly at the steward and did not avoid him at all. The cold intent in his eyes made people shudder. "Let's start." The manager laughed coldly. Then he clapped his hands and a black-clothed cultivator appeared on the auction platform. Following that, the black-clothed martial artist moved his palm and a strange power surged out. The moment that strange power appeared, the smell of blood filled the entire auction house. Such a strong smell of blood. Nyetian's eyes couldn't help but tremble as he sensed the smell of blood. He did not expect the Blood Tribulation force to be so terrifying. At that moment, the black-clothed martial artist turned his palm and the power of the Blood Calamity circulated in the air, surging into Ni Jiaming's body. Ni Jiaming's body could not help but tremble the moment the Blood Calamity force entered his body. He could not help but groan. At that moment, he could feel the power within his body rumbling nonstop. It was as if his entire body was about to explode. The power of the Blood Tribulation was abnormally violent, causing one's blood chi to churn. Ordinary martial artists would not be able to withstand it. "Brat, you can't even withstand a Blood Calamity force." The steward looked at Ni Jiaming and said with a cold smile. Again, Ni Jiaming's eyes were deep and murderous as he roared fiercely. "Very good, as expected of the renegade dragon body." The manager waved his hand coldly, indicating for the black-clad cultivator to continue. Of course, he didn't want Ni Jiaming to die so quickly. The longer Ni Jiaming lasted, the higher the auction price would be. "Come on." The martial artist in black smiled coldly. Then, he moved his palm and a second Blood Calamity force appeared, directly entering Ni Jiaming's body. Awesome. As the power of the Blood Calamity entered his body, Ni Jiaming roared like a wild beast. Then he laughed wildly and shouted, A bunch of scoundrels, come again." Nyetian's eyes trembled when he saw this scene. He could clearly feel the violence of the Blood Calamity force. Even if Ni Jiaming's talent was extremely high and his bloodline power was extremely strong, his martial body would still be in great pain after enduring two Blood Calamity forces. Guling Wuji looked at Ni, jamming with trembling eyes, and said in a deep voice, "Two streams of blood calamity force, and this guy is completely fine. This is too scary." "Senior, how strong is the force of the blood calamity?" Nyetian focused his gaze and asked Guling Wuji. "The force of the blood calamity force has a great impact on a martial artist's bloodline power. An ordinary martial artist cannot withstand it at all." Guling Wuji's eyes darkened as he said, "I have seen countless blood calamity martial artists die at the Haoyan auction house. Even those with extremely strong bloodlines cannot withstand it. 5 streams of the blood calamity force." 5 streams of the blood calamity force? Nyetian's eyes narrowed and his expression changed. He did not expect the blood calamity force to be so strong. What if he can withstand 5 streams of the blood calamity force? Nyetian asked in a deep voice as his eyes darkened. "That depends on the Haoyan auction house's estimation of the Ni dragon physique. If he does not meet the expectations of the auction house, he will continue to bear the blood calamity force until he dies," Guling Wuji said in a deep voice with an ugly expression. "This?" Nyetian's expression changed, and he could not help but be stunned for a moment. The viciousness of the auction house had exceeded his expectations. After a while, Nyetian became much calmer and said in a deep voice, "Senior Guling, please state a price and stop the blood calamity test. I don't have that many tokens. If I bid without a price, the auction house will not let us go." Guling Wuji's face darkened, and he looked helpless. The auction house had a special rule. The bidders had to use special tokens. Guling Wuji only had 3 tokens, which was not enough to bid for Ni jamming. With Ni jamming's talent, he was worth at least 100 Haoyan tokens. Nyetian's face darkened. He felt as though he was suppressing half of the power in his heart. Again, at that moment, Ni jamming roared wildly. He was extremely insolent. At that moment, he had already withstood 4 streams of the blood calamity force. What a terrifying Ni dragon physique. Guling Wuji's face darkened, and he was shocked when he saw that. Ni jamming had withstood 4 streams of the blood calamity force, yet he was still so fearless. It was too terrifying. The terror of the Ni dragon physique was beyond Guling Wuji's expectation. "Young man, can you still withstand the 5th stream of the blood calamity force?" The steward looked at Ni jamming and smiled coldly. He was sinister and ruthless. "Come on," Ni jamming roared. He was completely fearless. "Very well." The steward smiled and gestured for the martial artist in black to continue. "Humph." The martial artist in black sneered. He extended both his hands and released 2 streams of the blood calamity force. He wanted Ni jamming to withstand 2 streams of the blood calamity force at the same time. "Young man, you can die in peace." The martial artist in black smiled sinisterly. He moved both his palms and injected 2 streams of the blood calamity force into Ni jamming's body. "Ah!" The sudden and violent pressure caused Ni jamming to let out a wild cry. Instantly, his body trembled as numerous bloody wounds appeared on his body. His entire body became dripping with blood, and it was an extremely tragic sight. 7 streams of the blood calamity force. Guling Wuji's eyes trembled, and he could not help but exclaim in shock. He had never expected Ni jamming to withstand 7 streams of the blood calamity force and break the auction house's record. Chapter 39:25. Nyetian's figure was like a ray of light as he stepped onto the auction stage. Ni jamming. His pupils couldn't help but constrict when he saw Ni jamming's entire body dripping with blood, and he roared in a low voice. "Nya, Tian." A familiar voice rang in Ni jamming's ears, causing his bloodied body to tremble involuntarily. He used up all his strength to lift his head and see a familiar face. He called out the other party's name with difficulty. "It's all right, I'll get you out of here." Nyetian's eyes turned cold as he said in a serious tone. His eyes were filled with extreme determination. Ni jamming nodded and immediately fainted. 7 blood calamity forces was his limit. If there was an 8th blood calamity force, it would definitely cause his blood chi to go berserk and he would die on the spot. Under the stimulation of the blood calamity force, his bloodline power would become extremely violent. Not only would it not affect the refining of bloodline elixirs, it would also make the bloodline elixirs more effective. Because of this, the people in the auction house did not mind the bloodline slaves dying under the blood calamity force. Where did this brat come from? You're courting death. Just then, the black-robed martial artist who had cast the blood tribulation on Nietion came to his senses. With a roar, he took a step forward and threw a punch at Nietion. There was a special restriction on the auction stage. Even the black-clothed martial artist was completely suppressed and could only use the power of his martial body. Nietion's expression darkened as he sensed the terrifying killing intent in the air. However, he did not panic. Instead, his eyes darkened as he slightly leaned to the side and threw a punch. Bang! In the next instant, the two fists collided and a muffled sound was heard. It was as if metal and stone had collided. Immediately after, Nietion's figure retreated a few meters. He only managed to stabilize his body by relying on the terrifying power that erupted from his legs. However, when he looked at his arm again, his clenched fist was already a bloody mess. One could even see the ghastly white bones. The bones in his arm were all broken, and even half of his body seemed to have lost feeling. It was unknown how much stronger the black-clothed cultivator was than Nietion. Even if it was a clash of martial bodies, the strength of his punch was not something that Nietion could withstand. The black-robed cultivator heavily injured Nietion with one punch. His eyes were not filled with joy, but shock. He could not help but cry out. He had never imagined that Nietion was still alive. He was a Saint King of the Ninth Heaven's calamity, an expert that was only one step away from the Tianjua Saint Emperor plane. His opponent was just a heavenly mandate Saint Master. How could he withstand the power of his punch? One had to know that even a Tianyi Ninth Heaven Great Sage would die on the spot with that punch. But Nietion was only seriously injured, and it wasn't even fatal. How is this possible? Could it be that the martial body of the Divine Master of the heavenly mandate in front of him was stronger than that of the Saint of Tianyi of the 9th level? At this time, the people in the various VIP suites also saw the shocking scene, just now. Many people were stunned on the spot and were completely speechless. A heavenly mandate Saint Master had actually blocked the punch of a Saint King of the heavenly mandate. This was too incredible. The gap of 2 whole realms was actually not that obvious to these two people. Nietion, in a VIP suite. EMO and the others were trembling in shock. They looked at Nietion with incomparable horror. Their nerves were tense, and their hearts were in their throats. Guling Wuji was also stunned and did not react for a while. Your punch is just SOSO. At this time, above the auction house, a low and arrogant voice sounded. Nietion looked at the black-clothed cultivator without fear. Instead, he mocked him. Bastard, you're courting death. The black-clothed cultivator looked at Nietion and was completely enraged. He roared and stomped his feet hard. He punched out with both fists and attacked Nietion. Stop. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly rang out, causing the black-clothed cultivator to freeze and come to a halt. Sir, the black-clothed cultivator turned to look at the steward in cyan and frowned. Obviously, he was very confused as to why the steward had suddenly asked him to stop. Boy, do you know what you were doing just now? The person who had just stopped the black-clothed cultivator was none other than the steward in cyan on the stage. At this time, the steward did not pay attention to the black-clothed cultivator. Instead, his eyes flashed with a sinister light as he asked with a playful expression, I was saving my friend. Nietion looked at the steward and responded coldly. Humph. The steward in cyan looked at Nietion and laughed strangely. He said, Boy, let me tell you, in the history of Haoyan Auction House, there has never been a blood calamity martial slave who could walk out of Haoyan Auction House alive. Do you think you can save the rebel dragon body with your strength? If I can save him, I will save him. If I can't, I will save him. Nietion's eyes were cold and murderous as he said each word coldly. What a brave and loyal boy. The steward in cyan smiled cold. Then, his expression suddenly changed. He said, since you care so much about your friend, then die with him. Do it." After saying that, he looked at the black-clothed cultivator and spat out 2 words cold. The black-clothed cultivator responded. Then, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He stared coldly at Nyetian as if he wanted to eat him alive. He hadn't been able to kill Nyetian with the previous punch, so he was determined to kill Nyetian with the next punch. Wait a minute. However, at this time, a vigorous voice sounded. Then, a figure appeared and landed on the auction house. An expert. The steward in cyan could not help but cry out in surprise when he saw the old man who had suddenly appeared in front of him. When Nyetian saw the old man, he felt slightly relieved, and the tense expression on his face eased a little. Guling Wuji had finally come down. "Steward, what happened just now was a misunderstanding. I apologize to your auction house. Please be merciful and let me take him away." Guling Wuji's face was gloomy. He was silent for a long time before he finally spoke. Moreover, he bowed slightly to the steward and lowered his attitude. At this time, he only wanted to take Niet Tian away. However, at this time, dozens of black-clothed cultivators appeared in the sky above the auction house. Each of them had a powerful aura. They surrounded the entire auction house like dark clouds. The steward in cyan glanced at the Haoyun hidden guards above him and sneered. Then, he looked at Guling Wuji and said, "Haoyun Auction House has been established for millions of years. This is the first time someone has dared to cause trouble so openly. Do you think I can let you go just like that?" "Sir Manager, it was indeed a misunderstanding just now. I am a good friend of Sir Du of your auction house. Please give me some face." Guling Wuji looked at the arrogant little manager in front of him. He forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a deep voice, Chapter 39:26. The manager's eyes froze when he heard Guling Wuji's name. He was visibly nervous and asked, "You know the god of war?" "I'm his friend." Guling Wuji frowned and replied coldly when he saw the manager's expression change so quickly. "How can you prove it?" The manager's face darkened and asked cautiously, "Is this enough?" Guling Wuji took out a token and showed it to the green-robed supervisor. "This is..." The manager looked at the token and was stunned. "The God of War's God of War's God of War's token. What do you think?" Guling Wuji responded in a low voice with a tense face. "All right." The manager hesitated for a long time before he finally spoke. "Since you're the God of War's friend, what happened just now was a misunderstanding. You can take this young man away." "Thank you." Guling Wuji said coldly and walked towards Nyetian, ready to take him away. "Where's my friend?" Nyetian frowned and asked an eye jamming. "Let's go." Guling Wuji said with an ugly expression. It was already good enough that he could save Nyetian. It was impossible for him to take Ni jamming away. "I will not leave until I take him away," Nyetian said cold and gloomy. The cyan-robed steward looked at Nyetian and said with a cold smile, "Kid, don't push your luck." The fact that Nyetian had interrupted the blood tribulation test was a huge taboo in the auction house. If it weren't for Du Wujuan, he wouldn't have allowed Guling Wuji to take Nyetian away. Du Wujuan had a high status in the auction house. He was a big shot in the auction house. However, he could only allow Nyetian to leave and not Nyetian to take an eye jamming away. An eye jamming was a blood tribulation martial slave and could not leave the auction house alive. This was the rule of the auction house. Nyetian. Guling Wuji looked at Nyetian and urged. Now that things had come to this, it was already a blessing and misfortune that he could save Nyetian. It was impossible for Nyetian to take an eye jamming away. "I must save him." Nyetian looked at Guling Wuji and enunciated each word with determination in his eyes. He had no choice but to save an eye jamming. If it really didn't work, he would ask Qin Chi to step in. However, Qin Chi was currently in the middle of constructing a great formation within the 9 extremities and could not be disturbed. Thus, he would not let Qin Chi out unless it was absolutely necessary. "Mister, if this kid doesn't want to leave, then don't blame us." At this moment, the green-robed supervisor looked at Nyetian and said with a gloomy expression. Guling Wuji's expression was extremely ugly. He looked at Nye Tian, but did not know what to say. He knew that Nye Tian had made up his mind to save the body of the reverse dragon. However, there was no other way now. Even if he snatched Ni jamming by force, it was unlikely that he could save Ni jamming from the auction house. He was in a dilemma. Tell me, how is it possible to save him? Nye Tian's eyes darkened as he looked at the steward. The green-robed supervisor did not answer Nye Tian at all. Instead, he said coldly and gloomily, "Kid, if you don't leave now, you will end up like him." Nye Tian frowned and looked gloomy. After a while, he slowly raised his hand and was about to take out the angel's sacred token. Perhaps there were experts from the angel tribe here who could help him. If it really didn't work, he was willing to exchange the angel's sacred token for Ni jamming. The angel's sacred token was the supreme token of the angel tribe. The people of Haoyan Auction House should know that the value of a martial slave was far from the angel's sacred token. Do you really want to save the reverse dragon? However, at this moment, a deep voice suddenly sounded. Then, a figure appeared above the auction house. It was a martial artist in black. His facial features were as sharp as a knife, and his eyes were extremely deep, as if they were hiding a deep secret. He stood coldly high up in the sky like a mountain, making people feel a heavy sense of oppression. Sir God of War." The green-robed supervisor lifted his head and exclaimed in shock when he saw the martial artist in black. He had never expected Du Wujuan, the god of war, to appear at this moment. Du Wujuan. Guling Wuji looked at Du Wujuan and said in a deep voice. He had not expected Du Wujuan to suddenly appear. Nye Tian looked at Du Wujuan and was stunned. So this is the friend that Guling Wuji had mentioned. However, his eyes were trembling as he stared at Du Wujuan's forehead. To be more precise, he was staring at the Beacon Emperor's mark on Du Wujuan's forehead. He had never expected Du Wujuan to also have the Beacon Emperor's mark. This undoubtedly meant that Du Wujuan was also one of the 4 banners and 8 protectors of the Fengtian Fate sect, just like Guling Wuji. Since that was the case, the following matters seemed to be much simpler. Given Du Wujuan's status, he should be able to let Nye Tian take Ni jamming away. I know who you are. I'm willing to give you a chance. Before Nye Tian could speak, Du Wujuan's eyes darkened, and he said, "If your bloodline power is stronger than the reverse dragon body, I'll let you take him away." Sir God of War, this. The green-robed supervisor was stunned when he heard Du Junwa's words. His face turned ugly. Haoyan Auction House had never done something like this before. However, Du Wujuan did not care about the supervisor at all. His eyes were like sharp blades as they locked onto Nye Tian. "What do you mean?" Nye Tian's eyes darkened as he asked coldly. It was obvious that Du Wujuan already knew that he was the Beacon Emperor, but he had no intention of letting him take Ni jamming away so easily. "You will take the blood calamity test. If your bloodline power is stronger than the reverse dragon body, both of you can leave the auction house." Du Wujuan said sternly, "If your bloodline power isn't as strong as the reverse dragon body, both of you will have to stay at the auction house." Blood calamity test? Nye Tian frowned when he heard Du Wujuan's words. "Du Wujuan, are you out of your mind?" At that moment, Guling Wuji lifted his head and growled at Du Wujuan. He had not expected Du Wujuan to let Nye Tian take the blood calamity test, which was stronger than the reverse dragon body. The reverse dragon body had withstood 7 blood calamity forces. Nye Tian would have to withstand at least 8 blood calamity forces to be stronger than the reverse dragon body. Du Wujuan was clearly sending Nye Tian to his death. In Guling Wuji's opinion, no one could withstand 8 blood calamity forces. "I know who he is, and I know what I'm doing. I don't need you to remind me." Du Wujuan's reaction was very calm. He looked at Nye Tian and asked, "Are you willing to take the blood calamity test?" Chapter 39:27. Nye Tian. Upon hearing Nye Tian's answer, Guling Wuji's expression froze, and he exclaimed in shock, 8 streams of blood calamity force. Nye Tian was insane. The manager in green and the cultivator in black were stunned as well. They stared at Nye Tian in shock, unable to react for a long time. They never expected Nyetian to agree to do Wujuan's request. To be stronger than the rebel dragon body, one would need to withstand at least 8 streams of blood calamity force. A total of 8 streams of blood calamity force. This was an unimaginable amount of power. Before Ni jamming, the strongest blood calamity martial slave at the auction could only withstand 5 streams of blood calamity force. You agree? Du Wujuan stared at Nyetian with a slight change in his expression. He was clearly surprised. He hadn't expected that Nyetian would actually agree to his request. Nyetian did not say anything else. He only nodded. At that moment, the people in the VIP rooms could no longer hold it in and stepped forward. Countless gazes focused on Nyetian. Their eyes were filled with shock and excitement. Is this kid crazy? He dares to accept the blood calamity test. He's not just crazy, he's a demon. He wants to accept the test of 8 streams of blood calamity force. He's asking for death. This kid is a little stupid, but he's nice to his friends. For the sake of the rebel dragon body, he's willing to risk his life. As the crowd discussed, their eyes burned with passion. They wanted to see how capable this silver-haired cultivator was to dare to accept the blood calamity test. I'll ask you one more time. Have you thought it through? Du Wujuan ignored the others. His eyes flashed with a strange light as he stared at Nyetian and spoke in a deep voice. If Nyetian went back on his words, he would not mind and would let Nyetian go. Bring it on. Nyetian's eyes darkened as he said calmly. At that moment, half of his body had recovered slightly. However, his arm was still bloody and looked extremely miserable. Under such circumstances, enduring the power of 8 blood tribulations during the blood tribulation test was an act of lunacy to anyone. However, Nyetian's face was indifferent. His deep eyes were filled with determination, and he would not turn back. The black-clad cultivator on the auction platform could not help but look at Du Wujuan. Du Wujuan's face was gloomy, but he finally nodded. This. Guling Wuji's eyes widened and his aged face froze. It was as if he had been petrified and could not react for a long time. How could he have imagined that things would turn out like this? No matter what he said, it was too late. Come. Nyetian stood on the auction platform. His eyes were deep and gloomy as he looked at the black-clothed cultivator. Courting death. The eyes of the black-clad cultivator trembled. He was instantly enraged. With a cold shout, he waved his palm, and the power of the blood calamity appeared. A dense stench of blood filled the entire auction hall. When Nyetian felt the stench of the blood calamity, his eyes froze and his heart was filled with shock. Just now, he had already sensed the terrifying power of the blood calamity. However, when he felt the stench of blood at such a close distance, he was still shocked. Such a dense stench of blood seemed to seep into his bones and marrow, causing him to feel his blood vessels become restless. Young man, I sure want to see if your blood vessels are worthy of your arrogance. At that moment, the black-clad cultivator snickered. With a wave of his palm, the power of the blood calamity moved and entered Nyetian's body. The moment the power of the blood calamity entered his body, Nyetian could feel his insides rumble. It was as if a ferocious beast had appeared and was attacking his limbs and meridians, as if it was trying to tear his body apart. At the same time, the power of his bloodline became violent, roaring crazily like boiling water. At once, an excruciating pain shot through his body, as if thousands of blades were piercing through his bones. However, there was no change in Nyetian's eyes. The corner of his mouth twitched a little, but he didn't make a sound. The black-clad cultivator saw that Nyetian didn't have any reaction after enduring the first wave of the blood calamity. He couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, "Little bastard, you have guts, but I want to see how long you can last." As he finished speaking, he waved his palms, and 2 waves of the blood calamity's power entered Nyetian's body. Since Nyetian was going to have to endure the first wave of the blood calamity's power, he didn't hold back. Puff! With 2 waves of the blood calamity's power entering his body, even though Nyetian had a strong heart, his body couldn't help but tremble. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face turned as white as a sheet. Nietian. Upon seeing this, Guling Wuji's eyes flickered with astonishment, and he exclaimed, "I'm fine." However, Nietian suddenly raised his head, his eyes filled with determination as he spoke in a deep voice. Guling Wuji could feel the determination in Nietian's eyes, and his heart shuddered. "You're fine? Then give me 2 more waves of the Blood Calamity's power." The black-clad cultivator frowned, and his face darkened. With a low growl, he once again gathered 2 waves of the Blood Calamity's power and sent them into Nietian's body. Nietian's body trembled violently, as if he had been struck by lightning. His flesh and blood surged madly, like raging waves, as if they were about to break free from his control. In the blink of an eye, his flesh and blood condensed into a cloud of blood mist that was incomparably intense. Continue. After enduring 5 waves of the Blood Calamity's power, Nietian still didn't cry out in pain. Instead, he raised his head to look at the black-clad cultivator with bloodshot eyes and roared like a wild beast. The black-clad cultivator looked at Nietian and could not help but be stunned for a moment. Nietian had already endured 5 waves of the Blood Calamity's power, but he was still able to remain conscious. It was terrifying. At this moment, the onlookers were also stunned. Apart from excitement, there was also shock and fear in their eyes as they looked at Nietian. Only now did they realize how terrifying Nietian was. "Boy, since you're looking for death, I'll fulfill your wish." Then, the black-clad cultivator growled and stretched out his palms at the same time. 4 waves of the Blood Calamity's power appeared at the same time. Guling Wuji, who was standing aside, was shocked to see this. He didn't expect the black-clad cultivator to use 4 waves of the Blood Calamity's power at the same time. At the same time, Du Wujuan, who was high up in the sky, trembled and his expression changed. However, at this moment, the black-clad cultivator made his move. 4 waves of the Blood Calamity's power whizzed out, and like 4 bloody blades, they pierced into Nietian's body. The sudden pain was unbearable for Nietian, and he screamed at the sky. 4 waves of the Blood Calamity's power rushed into his body at the same time. The impact on his blood chi was unimaginable. Chapter 39-28. On the auction stage, the horrifying and bloody scene caused the entire auction house to fall into a dead silence. The atmosphere was so oppressive that it was suffocating. Everyone's eyes trembled violently. Their expressions were dull, as if they were petrified. Nobody expected that Nietian would actually explode on the spot after withstanding the power of 9 blood tribulations. After a while, Guling Wuji seemed to wake up from a dream. His eyes trembled in horror as he howled, "Nietian!" But at this time, Nietian's entire body was already a bloody mess. His body, riddled with bloody holes, swayed a little and fell to the ground with a loud bang. That black-clad martial artist looked at the fallen Nietian with a disdainful look and said cold, "You dog! How dare you be arrogant in Haoyan Auction House? You deserve to die." However, as soon as he finished speaking, his face immediately stiffened. A giant hand that was like an iron pincer tightly gripped his neck, causing him to almost suffocate. The black-clad martial artist looked at the face that suddenly appeared in front of him and used all his strength to speak with difficulty. "Lord, Army God." However, the hand gripping his neck tightened more and more, making it impossible for him to breathe. "Sir God of War, this." The steward's face turned pale at the sudden turn of events. He stared at Du Wujuan in horror, unable to utter a word. He did not understand why Du Wujuan would suddenly appear at this time. Earlier, wasn't it Du Wujuan who suggested letting Nietian undergo the blood tribulations test? However, that black-clad martial artist testing method was indeed a little overboard. He actually killed Nietian directly. Bastard! Right at this moment, a ferocious glint flashed in Du Wujuan's eyes. Following that, he roared like a wild beast. Then, a bloody light appeared in front of him. He actually forcefully crushed the black-clad martial artist's neck with one hand. That black-clad martial artist died on the spot before he could figure out what was going on. The green-clad steward suddenly sensed the terrifying murderous intent on Du Wujuan's body. His expression changed drastically, and his mouth opened wide. He wanted to say something, but could not say anything. He still did not understand why Du Wujuan would suddenly have such killing intent. The surrounding crowd was also shocked by the scene in front of them. Countless people were stunned on the spot. They had no idea what was going on. "You deserve to die too." At this moment, Du Wujuan suddenly turned around. His scarlet eyes were like those of a wolf as he stared fixedly at the green-clothed manager. "Sir God of War, The green-robed steward's eyes trembled and his expression froze. He was scared silly. Du Wujuan stepped forward and reached out his hand. Instantly, a terrifying murderous intent encapsulated the green-robed supervisor. "I won." Right at this moment, a weak voice suddenly rang out. Then, a shocking scene occurred. On the auction stage, the badly mutilated figure actually moved and then slowly stood up. Lord Beacon Emperor. Guling Wuji's pupils suddenly constricted. Looking at Nye Tian, who was slowly standing up, he could not help but shout out. He did not expect that Nye Tian was not dead, and that he had relied on his own strength to stand up. At this moment, Nye Tian's entire body was covered in blood. His body was filled with bloody holes, and one could clearly see that his bones were in a state of collapse. It was hard to imagine how a person could survive under such circumstances and how he could stand up again. The crowd gasped as they looked at the unyielding figure on the auction stage. The shock in their eyes had completely turned into fear. If they had not witnessed this scene with their own eyes, they would never have believed it. At this moment, they finally realized how terrifying this arrogant silver-haired martial artist was. "You're not dead?" Du Wujuan's body froze as he turned around and stared at Nye Tian. His aged face immediately froze. He could sense a weak life force from Nye Tian's body, which was intermittent and indistinct. However, Nye Tian's eyes were still as sharp as a blade, revealing a resolute determination. Du Wujuan felt like he was dreaming. He could not imagine that a martial artist could actually withstand the power of 9 blood calamity forces. "I won." Nye Tian looked at Du Wujuan and said word by word, "Can I take my friends away now?" Yes, yes. Du Wujuan's eyes were trembling, and his tongue was spinning as he subconsciously responded. Nye Tian's eyes were cold as he turned around with difficulty to look at Guling Wuji. The corner of his mouth twitched as he said, "Let's go." Guling Wuji's dull, old face finally reacted as if he had just woken up from a dream and nodded. Nye Tian. At this moment, Mo, Jun Jianxing, and the others appeared at the same time and landed on the auction stage. "Mo, take them, let's go." Guling Wuji glanced at Du Wujuan as if he wanted to say something, but he did not. He then turned around and said to Mo, Mo agreed and prepared to leave with Jun Jianxing and the others, taking Nye Tian and Ni jamming with them. Boom! However, at this moment, more than 10 figures in black moved in the sky above the auction house, releasing an enormous aura that was as heavy as a mountain. Guling Wuji frowned and looked at Du Wujuan. "Stand down." Du Wujuan roared with a stern face. The Haoyun secret guards were stunned and seemed to be in a difficult position. "I said stand down." Du Wujuan suddenly lifted his head. His eyes were as sharp as a blade as he stared at the Haoyun secret guards. Every word he uttered was filled with killing intent. The Haoyun secret guards felt Du Wujuan's killing intent and finally retreated. They did not understand why Du Wujuan would let Nye Tian and the others leave. This was related to the Haoyun auction house's reputation. Indeed, Du Wujuan had promised Nye Tian that as long as he surpassed the reverse dragon physique in the blood tribulation test, he could leave safely. However, was such a promise really important? At this moment, some smart people could tell that Du Wujuan had an unusual relationship with Guling Wuji and Nye Tian. The Haoyun auction house's secret guards did not want to let Nye Tian go, but under Du Wujuan's ferocity, they could only give in. "Du Wujuan, you're on your own," Guling Wuji said as he glanced at Du Wujuan and left with Nye Tian and the others. Du Wujuan watched Guling Wuji and the others leave with a strange expression. There was a hint of a smile in his eyes that was difficult to detect. After Guling Wuji and the others left the Haoyan auction house, they immediately headed to the Wan Yuan Pavilion. Although the people of the auction house had let them leave, it did not mean that they were safe. The Wan Yuan Pavilion was the safest place for them at this moment. "Everyone, where are you going?" However, at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared, as though he had been waiting for them at the entrance. Guling Wuji's expression changed slightly when he saw that person. He asked, "Who are you?" "I'm Ye Tian's friend. I'm here to save him," the person said with a faint smile. Chapter 39:29. When Ye Tian saw that the person who suddenly appeared in front of him was the holy son of all evil, his tired eyes froze and his heart was filled with surprise. He did not expect the holy son of all evil to appear at this time. However, he was not too sure if the person in front of him was really the holy son of all evil or the divine soul in the heart of all evil. The holy son of all evil's eyes were very strange, and it made Ye Tian feel a little uneasy. Guling Wuji could see the hesitation in Ye Tian's eyes and could not help but frown. He looked at the holy son of all evil with an unfriendly gaze. "Ye Tian, we promised to look for you later. Have you forgotten?" The holy son of all evil smiled faintly and looked at Ye Tian calmly. "You are." Ye Tian's eyes darkened, and he exclaimed at his heart. His pale face immediately froze. He had guessed correctly. The person in front of him was no longer the holy son of all evil, but the divine soul. Without a doubt, the holy son of all evil had been possessed. "Your Excellency, please leave." Seeing Ye Tian's reaction, Guling Wuji no longer tried to be polite and said coldly, if the holy son of all evil did not leave, he would directly attack. He did not have time to waste with the latter. "Ye Tian?" The holy son of all evil was still calm. He raised his eyebrows and called out, "He is my friend. Let's go together." Ye Tian reacted and nodded with difficulty. Guling Wuji was puzzled, but since Ye Tian had said so, he could not stop him. Hence, he brought the holy son of all evil to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. After a while, they arrived outside the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. However, just as they were about to enter, an unfriendly figure appeared. "It's you." Guan Quan was walking out of the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. When he saw Ye Tian, his eyes darkened and he shouted coldly, "You dog, how dare you come to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion?" Not long ago, he had a conflict with Ye Tian, and Ye Tian left a sword mark on his face. This humiliation was engraved in his heart, and he swore to kill Ye Tian. Never had he imagined that Ye Tian would actually dare return to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. However, Ye Tian's injuries were extremely severe. His entire body was dripping with blood, and it seemed as if his entire body was about to fall apart. However, he was still conscious. "Ha ha, you son of a B*TCH, to think that you would have such a day." Guan Quan walked over, and when he saw Ye Tian's condition, he immediately laughed out loud, taking pleasure in his misfortune. Guling Wuji's face was gloomy. He ignored him and entered the Wan Yuan Pavilion directly. "Stop right there." However, Guan Quan didn't intend to let Ye Tian and the others off. Instead, he smiled coldly and arrogantly said, "What kind of place do you think the Myriad Yuan Pavilion is? Do you think that just anyone can enter?" Scram! Guling Wuji's eyes darkened. He suddenly lifted his head and growled. His eyes were filled with eerie, murderous intent as he coldly stared at Guan Quan. Guan Quan suddenly felt the murderous intent assaulting his face. His body involuntarily froze, and he involuntarily took a few steps back. However, in the next moment, he calmed down and coldly smiled. "Do you know who I am? In the Wan Yuan Pavilion, no one dares to be arrogant in front of me." Slap! As soon as he finished speaking, a crisp sound of slap rang out. His face immediately swelled up, and several glaring bloody marks appeared on his face, like a brand. It was abnormally obvious. "You?" Guan Quan was stunned. His eyes stared at Guling Wuji in shock. He clearly didn't expect the latter to dare to hit him. "One more word and you'll die." Guling Wuji's face was dark, and his icy voice seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. Guan Quan's eyes narrowed, and he instantly didn't dare to speak. "Let's go," Guling Wuji said coldly, and directly entered the Wan Yuan pavilion. A moment later, they entered a room. "Nie Tian, are you okay?" Guling Wuji sensed Nie Tian's aura and asked with a gloomy expression. "I won't die." Nie Tian smiled bitterly. His aura was weak, but it was very stable. His life was no longer in danger. However, with such heavy injuries and the residual power of the blood calamity in his body, it was impossible for him to recover quickly. The recruitment of the 5 schools was about to begin, and the 5-day appointment between Nie Tian and the White Tiger Star Lord was approaching. At this moment, he urgently needed to recover. "Don't worry, I'm here." At this moment, the Holy Son of all evil walked over and said with a faint smile, "You?" Guling Wuji looked at the Holy Son of all evil, clearly not trusting the latter. Nie Tian's heavy injuries could only be treated slowly. Even Guling Wuji did not know how to recover quickly. What could the Holy Son of all evil do? "Take it." The Holy Son of all evil smiled faintly and took out a blood-red medicinal pill, handing it to Nie Tian. "Oh." Nie Tian frowned. He sensed the vigorous aura in the medicinal pill. His eyes lit up, and he asked, "What is this?" He actually sensed the aura of the blood calamity in the medicinal pill. It seemed like this medicinal pill was refined from the blood calamity's power. Blood calamity pill. The Holy Son of all evil's lips curled up, and he said, "Take this medicinal pill. It will allow your body to absorb the blood calamity's power." Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He clearly did not believe the Holy Son of all evil. "Don't worry, I won't harm you." The Holy Son of all evil could tell what Nie Tian was thinking. He said directly, "I still have something to ask of you." Nie Tian frowned and finally nodded. He took the blood calamity pill and swallowed it. The moment the medicinal pill entered his body, he felt a warm current spread throughout his body, greatly alleviating his pain. Then, the power of the medicinal pill flowed through his meridians like a flood. Like the spring breeze and rain, it began to dissolve the violent blood calamity's power. Nie Tian's eyes lit up. The Holy Son of all evil was right. The blood calamity pill was indeed dissolving the blood calamity's power. His martial body was slowly absorbing the blood calamity's power and turning it into his own. "How did you get the blood calamity pill?" At that moment, Guling Wuji looked at the Holy Son of all evil and asked coldly. No comment. The Holy Son of all evil's face was calm as he replied coldly. Guling Wuji's expression darkened. He did not expect the Holy Son of all evil to speak to him in such a manner. However, since the Holy Son of all evil had just saved Nie Tian's life, he could not do anything. "Let's go and let him recover slowly." The Holy Son of all evil scanned the crowd and said with a smile. Then, the crowd left, leaving Nie Tian alone in the room. Nie Tian sat in a lotus position and slowly absorbed the blood calamity's power. The wounds on his body began to heal at a rapid pace. A day later, Guling Wuji and the others entered the room again. Nie Tian stood up. His eyes were extremely sharp, and his entire body was showing off. Chapter 39:30. The Heaven and Earth Seal was unsealed once again, causing Nie Tian's aura to be much stronger than before. However, he was still unable to break through to the heavenly justice realm. "Nie Tian, are you all right?" Guling Wuji looked at Nie Tian in shock. The shock in his heart was written all over his face. He had never expected that Nie Tian would be able to recover from such a serious injury within a day. "I'm fine now." Nie Tian smiled calmly. Jun Jinxing and the others looked at Nie Tian in shock as well. 9 streams of blood calamity power, but only one Heaven and Earth seal was unsealed. "It seems like your sky sword is more powerful than other people's origin weapons." The Saint of all evil looked at Nie Tian and said with a playful expression. Nie Tian frowned and said, "You knew that my Heaven and Earth seal would be unsealed?" "Of course." The Saint of all evil chuckled and said, "The blood calamity power is similar to the 5 calamities in the sky. It can also be used to unseal the heaven and earth seal. However, the power is very violent and has a great impact on a martial artist bloodline. It cannot be absorbed directly and must be supplemented by the blood calamity pill. I wanted to give you the blood calamity pill, but I did not expect you to participate in the blood calamity trial and endure 9 streams of blood calamity power. Since your body already has the blood calamity power, I can only let you consume the blood calamity pill directly. It seems like the effect is not bad. At least your martial constitution has recovered, and you've unsealed 1 heaven and earth seal. Nietian looked at the saint of all evil with a solemn expression. He seemed to have understood something and said, "You went to Haoyan auction house to unseal the heaven and earth seal with the blood calamity power, right?" "Yes." The saint of all evil did not deny it and nodded with a faint smile. He went to the auction house to use the blood calamity power to unseal the heaven and earth seal in the death god's scythe. He did not expect to meet Nietian there. "Then you are now." Nietian frowned as a strange light flashed in his eyes. The holy son of all evil smiled faintly and said without any hesitation, "The holy son of all evil that you know no longer exists. I am now the owner of this body. You can call me Mori Shire." Mori Shire? Nietian looked at the man who called himself Mori Shire in front of him and could not help but frown with a strange expression. Such a name was very novel. It seemed like his guess was right. The holy son of all evil had been possessed by Mori Shire. Previously, when Mori Shire stopped Nietian from killing the son of all evil, he must have made preparations to possess the son of all evil. However, it wasn't sufficient and needed some time. "What do you want from me?" Nietian didn't mince words and went straight to the point. "Of course I have conditions for saving you, but I haven't thought about them yet." Mori Shire grinned as his eyes flashed with an evil light. Nietian frowned and did not say anything else. Then he suddenly thought of Ni Jiaming and lifted his head to look at Guling Wuji. He asked, "Where is Ni Jiaming? How is he?" "His injuries are very serious, and he is resting. His life is no longer in danger, but it will take some time for him to fully recover." Guling Wuji's expression was heavy as he nodded. Nietian's gaze froze, and he couldn't help but look at Mori Shire. The latter laughed and said, "The blood calamity pill can only be used on those with a heart. Though your friend has the body of a renegade dragon, without an origin weapon, he cannot withstand the violence of the blood calamity pill." Nietian's expression was heavy as he nodded helplessly. Ni Jiaming did not have a core of heaven and earth. If he consumed the blood calamity pill, not only would it not save his life, but it would also worsen his injuries. "All right, since you're fine, I'll take my leave. We'll meet again during the recruitment." Apocalypse 12 smiled faintly and took his leave. Nietian stared at Mori Shire's back, and his expression did not look good. For some reason, he felt that Mori Shire was not as simple as he seemed. There might be a big conspiracy behind him. Then, under Guling Wuji's lead, Nietian arrived at Ni Jiaming's room. In the room, Ni Jiaming was half lying on the bed. His face was as white as a sheet, and he looked extremely ugly. "Nietian, quick, go save Roer." Seeing Nietian appear, Ni Jiaming shouted in excitement and struggled to stand up. However, his injuries were too serious. His entire body felt like it was about to collapse, and he could not stand at all. "Roer, where is she?" Nietian's eyes trembled and his expression changed. He took a step forward and asked in surprise. "She was captured by someone." Ni Jiaming's face was pale, and it was very difficult for him to speak. The violence of the blood calamity force was unimaginable. Even with his renegade dragon physique, it was impossible for him to endure it easily. "What exactly happened?" Nietian's face was dark, and he asked in a deep voice. Ni Jiaming took a deep breath and explained the process of the matter briefly. It turned out that he had always been with Nieyuro. Later on, they came to the sacred world by chance and developed very well. This time, they came to Vast Cloud Sacred City for the recruitment of the 5 great academies. However, as soon as they arrived at Vast Cloud Sacred City, they were targeted. Nieyuro was captured, and he became a martial slave of the vast cloud auction house. Fortunately, Nie Tian appeared in time. Otherwise, he would have died. Do you know who captured Roa? After listening to Ni jamming, Nie Tian's face was dark and murderous. There seemed to be a raging fire burning in his body as he asked coldly. I don't know. Ni jamming shook his head helplessly. However, in the next moment, he seemed to have thought of something and said, when I was fighting with those men in black, I saw a special brand on one of their wrists. It seemed to be some kind of rune. What kind of rune? Do you still remember? Nie Tian's eyes trembled and he asked in a deep voice. Something like this, Ni jamming used his mind to condense a figure based on his memory and sent it to Nie Tian's mind. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly. The brand seemed to be some kind of beast. It was very strange. He condensed the brand with sword intent and placed in front of Guling Wuji. He asked, Senior, have you seen such a brand before? This is... When Guling Wuji saw the brand, his eyes could not help but tremble. Suddenly, his face changed and he was stunned. What is it? Nie Tian saw Guling Wuji's reaction and he could not help but tremble. He asked hurriedly, This? Guling Wuji frowned and hesitated before saying, If I'm not wrong, this is the vast cloud brand of the City Lord's Mansion. City Lord's Mansion? Nie Tian frowned and his face suddenly changed. He asked, What's City Lord's Mansion? The City Lord Mansion of vast cloud, sacred city. Guling Wuji's face was tense. He was obviously very nervous as he said in a deep voice. Chapter 39-31. Let's go to the City Lord's Mansion now. Nie Tian stared at the vast cloud seal with murderous eyes and said coldly. Although he was suppressing the anger in his heart, anyone could see that he was furious at this moment. Nie Tian. At this moment, Guling Wuji blocked Nie Tian's path, his face very grim and unsightly. Senior, Ro-Er is my sister. I must save her, Nie Tian said solemnly. Nie Tian, do you know what kind of place the vast cloud City Lord's Mansion is? Guling Wuji furrowed his brows and said, The vast cloud sacred city is the core city of the southern brilliance sacred world. The strength of the City Lord's Mansion is comparable to a first-rate force. Furthermore, the vast cloud City Lord's Mansion is supported by a great force. It's easier said than done. I know it's difficult, but I must go. Nie Tian frowned and his eyes were firm. No matter what, he must save Nie Yuro. Wait a moment. I'll go look for Master Qing Chi and see if he's willing to help. Guling Wuji looked at Nie Tian and felt the determination in the latter's eyes. He could not help but be moved and said in a low voice, Master Qing Chi is busy now and cannot be disturbed. Nie Tian frowned and said coldly, You've seen Master Qing Chi? Guling Wuji was stunned and surprised when he heard Nie Tian's words. Obviously, he did not expect Nie Tian to know about Qing Chi. Of course, he did not know about the relationship between Nie Tian and Qing Chi. Qing Chi was in the nine extremities preparing a great formation for Rui Qianyu and could not be disturbed. Nie Tian did not know to what extent the great formation was being built. If he went to look for Qing Chi and delayed the great formation, it would be troublesome. Nie Tian nodded and took out the 10,000 yuan sacred token and said, Master Qing Chi gave me this. When Guling Wuji saw the token in Nie Tian's hand, his eyes involuntarily shrunk as he cried out in surprise, The 10,000 yuan sacred token. He couldn't believe his eyes. Nie Tian was actually holding the 10,000 yuan sacred token in his hand. The 10,000 yuan sacred token was the supreme token of the 10,000 yuan pavilion. There were only 4 of them in the entire 10,000 yuan pavilion, and all of them were personally safeguarded by the pavilion master, Qing Chi. Only the most important people in the 10,000 yuan pavilion could obtain the 10,000 yuan sacred token. Guling Wuji and Qing Chi had known each other for hundreds of thousands of years, and they had even experienced several life and death situations together. Even so, Qing Chi did not give him a 10,000 yuan sacred token. When Nie Tian first met Qing Chi, the latter gave him the 10,000 yuan sacred token. How could Guling Wuji not be surprised? He could not help But wonder what kind of person Tian was for Guling Wuqi to value him so much. Yes. Tian nodded his head, and then his eyes slightly trembled as he said, Senior Guling, if I use this 10,000 yuan sacred token to exchange for my sister, will the people in the City Lord Mansion agree? This. Guling Wuji was stunned, and his face involuntarily froze. It turned out that Tian took out the 10,000 yuan sacred token to save a person. The 10,000 yuan sacred token was the supreme token of the 10,000 yuan pavilion, and it was given to him by Qing Qi. If he gave it to the City Lord Mansion so easily, would it really be all right? I will explain to Senior Qing Qi. Tian could tell what Guling Wuji was thinking, and said in a deep voice, I just want to know if the 10,000 yuan sacred token could be exchanged for my sister. Yes, it should be possible. Guling Wuji reacted, and his tongue seemed to be spinning as he nodded his head. Using the supreme token of the 10,000 yuan pavilion to exchange for a person's life, the people in the City Lord Mansion should have no reason to refuse. That's good. Tian nodded his head and said as he left. He knew that with his current strength, it was impossible for him to go against the City Lord Mansion, so he could only use this aggrieved method to save Nyeyuro. The 10,000 yuan sacred token was very important, but compared to Nyeyuro's life, it was nothing. After a while, Tian came to the main hall of the 10,000 yuan pavilion. Lord Guling. At this moment, a steward walked over and looked very flustered. What's the matter? Guling Wuji's face was gloomy, and he asked in a cold tone, The City Lord Mansion invites you. The steward came to Guling Wuji's side, and with both hands, he handed over an invitation and said respectfully, Huh? Guling Wuji frowned, and his expression changed. After receiving the invitation, he used his divine sense to sense it, and his face slowly turned ugly. Senior, what does the invitation say? Tian asked with a frown when he saw Guling Wuji's strange expression. The vast cloud city lord already knows that we took away the rebel dragon body from the auction house. He wants me to go to the City Lord Mansion and bring the rebel dragon body with me. Guling Wuji's face was gloomy, and the worry in his eyes was very obvious. The people from the City Lord Mansion had captured Ni, Jiaming, and Nyeyuro. Now that Ni Jiaming had been rescued from the auction house, the people from the City Lord Mansion were alarmed. Moreover, the vast cloud city lord had personally sent an invitation for Guling Wuji to make a trip and said that he would bring the rebel dragon body with him. It was obvious that Ni Jiaming and Nyeyuro had not been captured randomly by the people from the City Lord Mansion, but had been premeditated. Otherwise, how could the rescue of a martial slave have alarmed the vast cloud city lord? It seemed that it would not be as easy for Tian to rescue Nyeyuro from the City Lord Mansion. Let's go. Tian looked at Guling Wuji and did not say much, but said coldly. He had already felt that the matter of Ni, Jiaming, and Nyeyuro being captured was not as simple as it seemed. There seemed to be a big conspiracy behind it. But at this time, even if it was a mountain of knives or a sea of fire, he still had to go. Yes. Guling Wuji nodded and followed Tian. This time, only the two of them went to the City Lord Mansion, while Emo, Jun Jinxing, and the others stayed in the Wan Yuan Pavilion. In a place like the City Lord Mansion, there were many experts. Even if Emo and the others followed, it would be useless. It was safer to stay in the Wan Yuan Pavilion. After leaving the Wan Yuan Pavilion, Tian and Guling Wuji rushed to the City Lord Mansion. In the entire vast cloud sacred city, the City Lord Mansion was second only to the Wan Yuan Pavilion in terms of security. From a certain point of view, the City Lord Mansion was the core of vast cloud sacred city. After a while, Tian and Guling Wuji arrived outside the vast cloud City Lord Mansion. Even before entering the City Lord's Mansion, Tian sensed a boundlessly powerful aura enveloping the entire City Lord's Mansion, as if a giant, invisible hand had enveloped the entire place. What a strange array formation! Tian's gaze narrowed slightly, and he exclaimed in his heart. The defensive array of the vast cloud City Lord Mansion seemed somewhat strange. It was actually a kind of array formation that he had never seen before. At this time, outside the City Lord mansion, there were two neat rows of black-clothed martial artists standing on both sides, unmoving like mountains. All of them had vigorous auras, and their strength was actually akin to a holy emperor realm. Chapter 39-32. Nyetian, let's go in. Guling Wuji's eyes swept across the guards. The corner of his mouth twitched as he walked in front. The guards seemed to know who they were. They didn't stop them and let them in. After entering the City Lord's mansion, Nyetian and Guling Wuji were led by a steward to the main hall of the City Lord's mansion. Along the way, Nyetian sensed many powerful auras hiding. They should be the City Lord's mansion's secret guards. Other than the guards on the surface, the City Lord's mansion had countless secret guards protecting the City Lord's mansion at all times. Lord Guling has arrived. Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you. Before Nyetian and Guling Wuji entered the City Lord's mansion, a vigorous voice rang out like a clap of thunder. Nyetian suddenly felt a terrifying oppressive force. His face couldn't help but change. His body shook a little. He felt his blood boiling as though he was going to lose control. At the critical moment, a soft force appeared and protected Nyetian, blocking the terrifying oppressive force. Nyetian glanced at Guling Wuji and didn't say anything. He just nodded his head. City Lord, you can forget about such a welcome. Guling Wuji said immediately. Suddenly, a violent aura surged and spread into the void. Bang! In the next instant, the void shook. Heaven and earth shook. Then, a terrifying force rippled and slowly dissipated. When Nyetian saw this scene, he couldn't help but be shocked. This was the collision of the aura between Guling Wuji and the City Lord of Vast Cloud City. The power that erupted was earth-shattering. Fortunately, he had Guling Wuji by his side. Otherwise, the surging power was enough to kill him instantly. Lord Guling, please take a seat. At this time, the City Lord of Vast Cloud City's voice sounded. It was obvious that he just wanted to test Guling Wuji and Nyetian. Guling Wuji nodded and brought Nyetian into the hall. In the main hall of the City Lord's mansion, a tall and sturdy middle-aged man was sitting upright on a large stone chair carved with a dragon. His eyes were deep and fierce, like a lion, and his entire body was emitting a vigorous power. This middle-aged man was the Lord of Vast Cloud, Sacred City, Huodantai. Nyetian looked at Huodantai, and his gaze trembled slightly. He could vaguely sense a powerful force circulating around Huodongtai's body, like a barrier, enveloping his entire body, giving him a strange appearance. At this moment, Huodongtai was also staring at Nyetian with a strange gaze. What surprised him in the test just now was not Guling Wuji, but Nyetian. Nyetian almost lost his life just now, but he did not panic at all. It was rare to find such a state of mind. What surprised him even more was that there was a terrifying power in Nyetian's body that he could not see through. Lord Guling, please take a seat. Huodongtai smiled faintly and regained his composure. He waved his hand at Guling Wuji. No need to sit. Let's talk about business. Guling Wuji did not appreciate the gesture and said coldly. Huodongtai laughed. Then he looked at Nyetian again and said, My friend, are you the one who endured the 9 trials of blood? That's me, Nyetian responded with a stern face. Amazing. Huodongtai's eyes narrowed, and he was shocked. Although he had guessed that Nyetian was the one who had saved the rebel dragon flesh, he was still shocked when Nyetian admitted it himself. Strangely enough, he could not see any sign of injury on Nyetian's body. According to the information he had received, not only had Nyetian endured the 9 trials of blood, his arm had also been destroyed. Even if he managed to survive, he would be a cripple. However, Nyetian did not look like a cripple at all. He was clearly a peerless genius. Huodongtai could not imagine what Nyetian had gone through to fully recover in just a day. City Lord, I'm the one who saved the rebel dragon flesh. I won't return it to you. Nyetian did not show any mercy. He said, The other person you've captured is my sister. I've come to the City Lord's mansion to save her. He was straightforward, honest, and arrogant at the same time. Oh, Huadongtai's eyes darkened as he raised his voice and rose from his seat. A ferocious aura burst out as he said, "Young man, you're the first person who dares to come to the city lord's mansion and ask for someone's help." Nietion's eyes darkened, but he was not afraid of Huadongtai at all. He said with a gloomy look, "City lord, tell me what you want." It was impossible for him to kidnap someone from the city lord's mansion, but he was willing to pay the price. "What do you want?" Huadongtai's eyes flickered as he said with a hollow laugh, "It's fine if you want to save her, but you'll have to trade your life for it. Are you willing to do that?" As soon as the low, cold, and murderous voice sounded out, the entire lobby was filled with a desolate aura of slaughter. It was oppressive to the point of suffocation. Huadongtai asked Nietion to trade his life for Huadongtai's. He was obviously not giving the latter any chance. Nietion looked at the overbearing Huadongtai, and his eyes narrowed. However, he suppressed the anger in his heart and took out the 10,000 yuan holy token. He said, "I'll trade this for my sister's life. How about it?" "This is..." Huadongtai saw the token in Nietion's hand, and his eyes heated up. He said in surprise, "The 10,000 yuan holy token." He never thought that Nietion would take out the 10,000 yuan holy token. He was the city lord of Vast Cloud City and was very familiar with the 10,000 yuan pavilion. Of course, he understood what the 10,000 yuan holy token meant. However, he did not understand why Nietion had the 10,000 yuan holy token. Could it be that he was related to Qing Chi? For a moment, Huadongtai was stunned as he looked at the 10,000 yuan holy token. "Are you going to trade or not?" Nietion looked at Huadongtai and enunciated each word in an overbearing manner. Huadongtai's eyes narrowed, as if he had just woken up from a dream. An evil light flashed in his eyes, and his lips twitched. He said, "I'm not trading. Not trading." His calm voice was like a clap of thunder. Nietion and Guling Wuji were stunned on the spot. They clearly did not expect that Huadongtai would not agree to the 10,000 yuan holy token as a condition. The atmosphere in the hall was so gloomy that it was hard for people to breathe. "Are you surprised?" After a while, Huadongtai smiled coldly and said, "That girl is important to you, but she is also important to someone else." "Someone else?" Nietion's expression changed when he heard Huadongtai's words. He asked in surprise, "Who?" Chapter 39-33. Huadongtai's eyes were cold and murderous. He no longer tried to hide his killer's intent. The moment it was released, it was like an invisible hand that engulfed the entire hall. In the blink of an eye, Nietion felt a suffocating pressure. His face turned red, and he found it difficult to even breathe. "Governor, what is the meaning of this?" Guling Wuji's eyes widened, and he growled. His powerful qi expanded and protected Nietion. He didn't think that Huadongtai would reveal his killer's intent and wanted to kill them. "I'm sorry. You shouldn't have interfered." Huadongtai snickered. His eyes were filled with killer's intent. He stepped forward, and a violent qi was unleashed. It pressed down on Guling Wuji and Nietion like a mountain. Guling Wuji could feel the immense pressure pressing down on him. He couldn't help but let out a gasp of astonishment as he, too, took a step forward to resist Huadongtai's attack. Bang! In the next moment, the two terrifying forces collided with each other like a landslide. In an instant, the space around them shook violently. A terrifying force exploded out and raged violently. Boom! Suddenly, the entire hall shook violently. If it weren't for the protection of the powerful array, the hall would have collapsed. Guling Wuji's eyes dimmed, and he couldn't help but take a few steps back. His face was as white as paper, and his forehead was covered in sweat. On the other hand, Huadongtai was like an old tree that was rooted to the ground. He didn't move an inch. His silhouette was like a mountain, and his qi was imposing. It was obvious that his capabilities were above Guling Wuji's. "Master Guling, I only want this young man's life. If you don't interfere, you can leave now." Huadongtai stared at Guling Wuji and said in a low voice, "If you want to kill him, you have to kill me first." Guling Wuji said in a low voice. Huadongtai's eyes darkened slightly. He was a little surprised. Obviously, He did not expect Guling Wuji to be willing to sacrifice his life for Nie Tian. At this moment, he could not help but ponder over Nie Tian's identity. At the same time, he felt a trace of fear in his heart. Nie Tian first took out the 10,000 yuan sacred token, and then Guling Wuji risked his life to protect him. This showed that his identity was definitely not simple. Huadongtai was already hesitant about the 10,000 Essence Pavilion. Coupled with the mysterious Guling Wuji, he felt a little uneasy. Guling Wuji saw Huadongtai's hesitation. His eyes darkened, and he said coldly, "City Lord, you have to think this through. Are the people behind you really worth it?" His tone was very calm, but it contained a strong sense of threat. At this point, I can't turn back anymore. Huadongtai's eyes darkened as he let out a low roar. His body trembled as a ferocious aura was released from his body, causing the entire hall to shake as if it was about to collapse. What a powerful bloodline power! Guling Wuji could feel the terrifying aura rushing towards him. His eyes trembled and he exclaimed. Huadongtai had directly used the bloodline power. It was obvious that he was going to kill. "You're from the Angel Clan?" However, at this moment, Nie Tian's expression changed slightly. His eyes shone with a blazing light, and he asked in surprise. He sensed the unique aura of the Angel Clan from Huadongtai's bloodline power. He did not expect Huadongtai to be from the Angel Clan. "So what if I am?" Huadongtai's face was stern, and he roared coldly. "Then you should recognize what this is, right?" Nie Tian's eyes trembled, and the corner of his mouth curled into a faint smile. He took out the Angel's Sacred Token. The Angel Sacred Token. Huadongtai's pupils shrank when he saw the token in Nie Tian's hand. He screamed in shock, and his face froze. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that Nie Tian would take out the Angel's Supreme Holy Medallion. That's right, it is the Angel's Sacred Token. With a faint smile, Nie Tian said, "You're a member of the Angels. You should know very well what this command medallion means." The Angel's Sacred Token was the supreme token of the Angel Clan. There were only 9 of them in the entire Angel Clan. The Angel's Sacred Token in Nie Tian's hand was given to him by the Holy Feather Clan's Holy Maiden, Lan Xuani. "Kid, how did you get the Angel's Sacred Token?" After a while, Huadongtai calmed down a little. However, his eyes were still trembling as he looked at Nie Tian and asked with a gloomy expression. The Angel's Sacred Token was extraordinary to the Angel Clan. Even the top experts of the Angel Clan did not have the Angel's Sacred Token. And Nie Tian, this outsider, how could he have the Angel's Sacred Token? "My Angel's Sacred Token was given to me by a friend of the Angel Clan," Nie Tian said calmly with an unperturbed expression. "Given." Huadongtai's gaze darkened, but he froze for a moment. Clearly, he did not quite believe it. How could something like the Angel Sacred Token be given to someone casually? At this time, Nie Tian did not talk nonsense with Huadongtai anymore. Instead, his expression darkened, and he said directly, "City Lord Vast Cloud, I now order you with the Angel's Sacred Token to release my younger sister." "You." Huadongtai's face darkened. His eyes stared at Nie Tian, but he was speechless for a while. He naturally did not care about Nie Tian, but the Angel's Sacred Token could not be defied. "Don't tell me you dare to disobey." Nie Tian looked at Huadongtai and growled cold. Huadongtai's expression was somewhat unsightly. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "Stinking brat, how would this city lord know that the token in your hand was truly given by the angel race and not obtained through deception? You wanted to say that it was snatched, but after thinking about it, Nie Tian's strength was not enough to snatch the angel's sacred token, so it could only be obtained by deception. City lord, does this mean that you do not recognize the angel's sacred token?" Nie Tian's gaze darkened. He did not explain anything, but said cold, "I wonder how the Sacred Feather Phoenix Supreme will feel when she sees this." Sacred Feather Phoenix Supreme? When Huadongtai heard this name, his expression changed again. He asked in horror, "You know the Sacred Feather Phoenix Supreme? My token was given by Her Highness the Saintess of the Holy Feather Race, Lan Xuani. Do you think I know the Sacred Feather Phoenix Supreme?" Nyation said solemnly with a cold expression. This. Huadongtai's expression darkened, and his expression turned ugly. Nyation said it so confidently, so he was obviously not lying. The angel's sacred token was very rare, but Huadongtai heard that the saintess of the Holy Feather race, Lan Shuani, had the extremely rare nine-winged supreme angel bloodline. So, she had an angel's sacred token. It seemed that the angel's sacred token in Nyetion's hand was indeed obtained through normal means. Chapter 39-34. Them. Nyetion saw Huadongtai's uneasiness and his face darkened as he asked, "Who are they?" "People from the Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion." Huadongtai frowned and said, "I can't explain too much to you now. We have to go over now. I hope we can make it in time." "Huh?" Nyetion frowned, and his face instantly became nervous. "Men." At this moment, Huadongtai bellowed, and two figures in black appeared and landed in the hall. "Immediately seal off vast cloud, sacred city. No one is allowed to enter or leave." Huadongtai's face was solemn as he ordered. "Yes," the two black-clothed cultivators replied. Then, their figures flashed, and they disappeared like ghosts. "City Lord, what's going on?" Nyetion's eyes darkened, and he had a bad premonition in his heart. He stepped forward and asked, "Let's go to the city gate first." Huadongtai said in a low voice and didn't give any explanation. His figure moved and flew out. Guling Wuchi and Nyetion looked at each other and immediately followed. After a while, Huadongtai, Nyetion, and the rest arrived at the city gate. Huadongtai walked over and said a few words to the guards. Then, he walked back with an ugly face. "City Lord, what happened?" Nyetion saw Huadongtai's face, and his heart sank as he asked anxiously. "We are late. The person has been taken away." Huadongtai's face was gloomy, and he shook his head helplessly. "The person has been taken away? What do you mean?" Nyetion frowned and asked in a low voice. "Let's go back to the City Lord residence first." Huadongtai looked around and seemed to be afraid of something. "Yes." Although Nyetion was anxious, he still nodded. Soon, everyone returned to the City Lord residence. "City Lord, what happened?" Nyetion looked at Huadongtai and asked directly. Huadongtai let out a sigh and recounted the sequence of events from beginning to end. A few days ago, the people from the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion found him and asked him to help them catch two people. They said that they were fugitives from the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion and were likely to come to Vast Cloud City. Huadongtai pondered. They were just two fugitives, and he could easily capture them. Moreover, he could also befriend the Heaven Tao Sacred Pavilion. Why not? Later, he caught the people that the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion wanted, Enai, Jiaming, and Nye Jiaming. Initially, Huadongtai thought that the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion was here for Enai Jiaming, who possessed the Enai Jiaming body. He didn't expect that the people from the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion would request him to hand over Nyeyuro and let them deal with Enai Jiaming. Hence, he sent Enai Jiaming to the Vast Cloud Auction House as a slave and imprisoned Nyeyuro, waiting for the people from the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion to come and take her away. Until yesterday, when he heard that someone rescued Enai Jiaming from the auction house, he realized that things might not be so simple. Hence, he sent someone to investigate Guling Wuji and found out that he went to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. Hence, he sent someone to the Myriad Yuan Pavilion to invite Guling Wuji over. After that, the people from the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion took Nyeyuro away and gave Huadongtai great benefits. They even asked him to kill the people who interfered in this matter. After Nyetion and the others arrived at the City Lord residence, Huadongtai already had the intention to kill them. He wanted to kill Nyetion and the others and end this matter once and for all. Because this matter concerned the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion, he did not show mercy even though Nyetion had the Myriad Yuan Sacred Token. In order to befriend the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion, it was worth it to offend the Myriad Yuan Pavilion. However, he never expected Nyetion to take out the Angelic Sacred Token. As a member of the angel race, he could not disobey the Angelic Sacred Token. No matter how strong the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion was, they could not make him betray the angel race. Unfortunately, when Dantai wanted to save Nyeyuro, she had already been taken away by the people from the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion. Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion. After hearing what Dantai said, Nyetion's eyes turned murderous and the blood in his body started to boil. He never expected that it was the people from the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion who took Nyeyuro away. He had already interacted with the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion many times, but he did not have a good impression of this organization. Why would the people from the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion want to capture a young lady? At this moment, Gu Ling Wuji frowned and spoke with a gloomy expression, as though he was talking to himself. I don't know either. Dantai glanced at Gu Ling Wuji, shook his head and said, I tried to ask the people from the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion, but they were very cautious and refused to say anything. This is troublesome. Gu Ling Wuji's eyes were gloomy and his expression was ugly. Initially, they thought that it was the Clear Cloud City Lord who took Nyeyuro away, but they did not expect the real mastermind to be the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion. The Clear Cloud City Lord was already an extremely powerful force, but compared to the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion, it was on a completely different level. Rescuing someone from a Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion was much more difficult than rescuing someone from the Clear Cloud City Lord. The Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion was known as the #1 force in the all-heavens sacred world, and its strength was unimaginable. Since they had spent so much effort to capture Nyeyuro, it was clear that they had some ulterior motive. Moreover, they would definitely guard her closely. It would be extremely difficult for Nyetion to rescue her from the hands of the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion. Where is the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion? Nyetion was silent for a long time. Then he suddenly lifted his head, and his eyes were as deep as water. Nyetion, you can't be thinking of rescuing someone from the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion, right? Gu Ling Wuji's heart trembled when he saw Nyetion's reaction, and he asked in shock, Ro Air is my younger sister. I have to save her. Nyetion's eyes were as clear as water, and his face was filled with killing intent. He recalled everything that happened in the 3,000 Lesser Worlds. He had watched Nyeyuro grow up, and she was his younger sister, who was related by blood to this body of his. How could he not save her? It didn't matter if the people who captured Nyeyuro were the Clear Cloud City Lord or the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion. Nyetion had to rescue her. This. Dantai and Gu Ling Wuji looked at Nyetion, and they were both stunned, not knowing what to say. My friend Nyetion, it's impossible for you to forcefully rescue her from the hands of the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion. After a moment of silence, Dantai spoke again and looked at Nyetion. In my opinion, the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion capturing your sister doesn't mean that she's definitely in danger. Maybe there's something on her that attracted the attention of the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion. Furthermore, when the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion asked me to capture them, they specifically instructed me not to harm them. This means that the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion didn't capture your sister to kill her. At least for the time being, your sister won't be in danger. What are you trying to say? Nyetion suddenly raised his head and looked at Dantai and asked directly. My friend Nyetion, the recruitment for the 5 academies is about to begin. At that time, the people from the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion will definitely appear. My friend Nyetion, the recruitment for the 5 academies is about to begin. At that time, the people from the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion will definitely appear. Why don't we investigate this matter in secret and find out why your sister was captured? That way, we can focus on saving her. Dantai's gaze sank, and he said carefully. Chapter 39-35. When Nyetion mentioned the Heaven Martial Association and the Myriad Star Pavilion, his eyes shone with a strange light. He knew that with his own strength, it was impossible to save Nyeyuro from the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion. If he wanted to save Nyeyuro, he had to rely on other forces. At this moment, the Scarlet Life Loyal Hearts Heaven Martial Association and Tian Sha's Myriad Star Pavilion might be able to help him. However, Tian Sha had already helped him once and said that he wouldn't help him again. Hence, it would be difficult for him to get Tian Sha's help. You want to rely on other forces to pressure the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion? Huadantai looked at Nietian and immediately knew what the latter was thinking. However, he shook his head and said, "Forces like the Heaven Martial Association and the Myriad Star Pavilion are not weak, but compared to the Heavenly Law Sacred Pavilion, they are far inferior. They can't pressure the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion at all." Nietian's face darkened, looking very unsightly. But at this moment, Huadongtai's eyes narrowed. He wanted to say something, but stopped. But what? Nietian was stunned and looked at Huadongtai anxiously. Huadongtai hesitated for a moment, but still said, "If you can get a good ranking in the recruitment of the 5 academies, the 5 academies might agree to some conditions to rope you in. At that time, you can borrow the strength of the 5 academies to pressure the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion." The 5 academies? Nietian frowned. He wasn't sure if the 5 academies had that kind of power. Huadongtai immediately saw through Nietian's worries and said, "The 5 academies don't participate in the conflict between the various forces, but they are very strong. If they are really willing to pressure the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion, the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion will definitely take it seriously." All right. Nietian heard Huadongtai's words and nodded his head. But Huadongtai suddenly smiled bitterly and said, "If you want the 5 academies to take you seriously, you have to stand out in this recruitment. You have to at least get into the top 100 or even the top 50. Otherwise, the 5 academies won't offend the Heavenly Tao Sacred Pavilion for you." Looking at Huadongtai, Nietian's eyes shone with a fierce light as he said in a deep voice, "What if I win first place? What will the 5 academies' attitudes be like?" First? Huadongtai was stunned for a moment before he smiled. He didn't want to laugh, but he couldn't help it. Nietian was only at the 9th tier of the Heavenly Mandate realm, but he claimed to be the top freshman of the 5 major academies. Anyone who heard this would have laughed. The recruitment of the 5 great academies was a grand event of the entire All Heaven Saints world. Basically, all the young geniuses would attend, so the cruelty and intensity of the competition could be imagined. With Nietian's cultivation, Huadongtai didn't even think he had the chance to pass the first round. But now, Nietian said he wanted to get first. How could he not laugh? "City Lord, you don't believe me, do you?" Nietian had long since anticipated Huadongtai's reaction. With a faint smile, his eyes glittered with a bright light, and he appeared to be very confident. "My friend Nietian, forgive me for being straightforward. With your current strength, it's impossible for you to get first in the recruitment of the 5 academies." Huadongtai laughed and said straightforwardly after sensing Nietian's confidence. He saw that Nietian had the angelic sacred badge. Otherwise, he wouldn't have spoken so politely. "If that's the case, I'd like to make a bet with you. Do you dare to accept?" Nietian's eyes darkened. They were like 2 sharp blades as he stared at Huadongtai. A bet. Huadongtai's expression changed slightly. He was shocked. He actually felt a sliver of threat from Nietian's gaze. However, he was an expert after all, so he remained calm on the surface. He smiled and said, "What bet?" "Bet whether I can get first in the recruitment of the 5 academies or not." Nietian's lips curled into a vicious smile as he said, Huadongtai frowned slightly. If Nietian had not been so serious, he would have thought he was joking. However, he soon smiled and said, "What do you think? So what if you can't?" Nietian smiled faintly. There was an undisguised viciousness in his laughter as he said, "If I get first, you'll have to serve me for the rest of your life. In other words, you'll be my dog." "You?" Huadongtai's expression suddenly changed when he heard Nietian's words. His eyes shone fiercely like an enraged beast. He clearly did not expect Nietian to dare to insult him in front of him. He was the city lord of Haoyun Sacred City. Even in the Saints' realm, he was an absolute expert. Nietian, a mere heavenly mandate Saint Master, actually asked him to be a dog. How could he not be angry? However, he still maintained a trace of rationality. He knew that Nietian had the angelic sacred badge, and he could not touch it. Guling Wuji also frowned and glanced at Nietian. He also felt that Nietian had gone too far. "City Lord, I haven't finished my words yet." At this time, Nietian was very calm. He smiled faintly and said, "If I don't get first, I'll give you my angelic sacred badge with both hands." "Do you mean it?" When Huadantai heard Nietion's words, his originally furious face suddenly froze. He immediately reacted and was replaced by joy. His eyes shone with excitement, and he screamed. He never thought that Nietion would actually bet the angelic sacred badge with him. He knew better than anyone else how important the angelic sacred badge was. If he could get the angelic sacred badge, then his status in the Angel Clan would skyrocket, and he would directly become a core figure of the Angel Clan. More importantly, in his opinion, Nietion had no chance of getting first at all. The 5 academies' joint recruitment had millions of warriors participating, and Nietion's strength was not even considered average among these people. Among these young warriors, there might even be heavenly tribulation holy kings, and there might even be high-level holy kings. And Nietion, a mere Saint Master, how could he fight with high-level holy kings? Under these circumstances, only a ghost would believe that Nietion could get first. Therefore, at this time, Huadantai felt that Nietion's angelic sacred badge was simply a free gift. If he didn't accept it, he would be a little embarrassed. Of course, Nietion looked at the excited Huadantai, smiled faintly, and nodded. At this time, Guling Wuji reacted, and his eyes trembled as he looked at Nietion and said in a low voice, "Nietion, you have to think it through. If Nietion could pass the test and enter the 5 academies, he would completely believe it. However, if Nietion could get first, he completely did not believe it. There were so many exceptional geniuses in the all-heaven sacred world, and none of them were weak. Nietion's talent was very strong, but if the difference in strength was too great, it was useless no matter how strong his talent was." Chapter 39-36. Guling Wuji had seen the usefulness of the angelic holy badge. He even felt that the angelic holy badge was more important than the holy badge of 10,000 yuan. He was naturally opposed to Nietion using such a precious thing to gamble with Huadantai. "I've thought it through, Senior Guling," Nietion said calmly, as if he didn't care at all. It was as if the angelic holy badge was completely useless to him, or he had absolute confidence that he could become the top student of the 5 academies. Huadantai looked at Nietion, and his heart sank. He quietly sensed Nietion's aura, as if he wanted to discover something, but he could not sense anything. He couldn't tell if Nietion's confidence was fake or if it was genuine. He really could not understand why a heavenly mandate Saint Master could be so confident. "City Lord, do you dare to gamble with me?" Nietion's eyes narrowed as he asked in a deep voice. The reason why he wanted to gamble with Huadantai this time was actually after careful consideration. First of all, Neyuro and Ni jamming had been captured, and Huadantai would bear the most direct responsibility. Although he was not the real mastermind, he was the biggest accomplice. So, Nietion had to make him pay. Otherwise, Ni jamming's bloody catastrophe and Neyuro's danger would have been in vain. Secondly, once this gamble was started, Nietion had undoubtedly forced himself into a dead end. He had no choice but to go all out and get first place at all costs. Only by getting first place could he make his conditions to the 5 academies. As for the third reason, it was even more important in the long run. Huadantai was a member of the Angel Clan. With his strength and identity, even if he was not a core member of the Angel Clan, he must have a certain amount of weight. Once Nietion proved his strength, he could then talk to the higher-ups of the Angel Clan through Huadantai. Only by meeting the higher-ups of the Angel Clan could he get close to the blood-winged angels. And the blood-winged angel was Cher's life-saving item. Therefore, Nietion had put almost everything on the line for this gamble. If he failed, he would truly be at the end of his rope. Although he appeared to be extremely confident, he actually did not have that much confidence in his heart. He had already experienced the cruelty of the 5 academies' recruitment. When he had encountered that super genius of the angel race, the holy light martial intent, he had already been amazed. Just this person alone was enough to make him feel a great pressure. But now, it was likely that he would encounter someone even stronger than the holy light martial intent. One could well imagine the difficulty of obtaining first place. But now that things had come to this, Nyetian could no longer turn back. He could only give it his all and fight for his own future. Do you really want to bet? What Dongtai's eyes darkened. He looked at Nyetian, and his voice trembled slightly. What? Nyetian looked at Huadongtai and couldn't help but laugh. He provocatively said, Sir City Lord, are you afraid? Huadongtai's complexion sank. His eyes flashed with a gloomy light. After a long period of silence, he finally hardened his heart and said, This city lord, I will bet. Good. Nyetian faintly smiled. He took out the angel's sacred token and handed it over. Sir City Lord, in order to express my sincerity, I will first give the angel's sacred token to you for safekeeping. Please help me look after it. Huadongtai looked at the angel's sacred token in front of him. He couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Nyetian's actions were truly unexpected. He didn't even know if this was because Nyetian trusted him or because he had absolute confidence in himself. Furthermore, Nyetian's tone was filled with the attitude of a superior, as if he, Huadongtai, was a servant. Huadongtai thought about it, but still took the angel's sacred token. He smiled and said, Nyetian, aren't you afraid that I will confiscate your angel's sacred token? Sir City Lord, are you insulting yourself? Nyetian smiled faintly. Sir City Lord, you are an important person in the all heavens sacred world. Why would you cheat a junior like me? And don't forget, I know the sacred feather phoenix supreme and her highness the holy maiden. Huadongtai gave a cold laugh. Don't worry. This city lord's words carry enormous weight. Since I bet with you, I won't go back on my word. Although this was what he said, he was very shocked inside. Nyetian's words just now were basically a show of mercy and threat. First, he raised him up high, and then he mentioned the sacred feather phoenix supreme and her highness the holy maiden. If this wasn't a threat, what was? But he, Huadongtai, was also an expert. How could he go back on his word? Although he was sure that he wouldn't lose, if he really did lose, Huadongtai, wouldn't be a backstabber. Very well. Nyetian smiled faintly. The corner of his mouth twitched. He said directly, Since that's the case, we'll take our leave first. I won't send you off, Huadongtai replied coldly, his face icy. Nyetian and Guling Wuji didn't linger, but left directly. Huadongtai watched the two figures slowly disappear. He felt an inexplicable unease in his heart. Vaguely, he felt as though he had fallen into someone else's trap. Nyetian and Guling Wuji left the city lord residence and quickly returned to Wan Yuan Pavilion. Nyetian went to CNI Jiaming and told him about Nye Yuro. He didn't hide anything. Although Ni Jiaming was as anxious as he was, he had no choice but to wait quietly. The Heaven Dao Sacred Pavilion had taken great pains to capture Nye Yuro. They probably didn't just want to kill her. At present, Nye Yuro's life shouldn't be in danger. After that, Nyetian went to see Tang 13 and told her about Rui Qinyu. In the blink of an eye, 2 days passed. The recruitment of the 5 major academies finally began. Nyetian and the others arrived at Vast Cloud Square. At this moment, the entire sky above the square was covered with a dense mass of human heads. Although the boundary of Vast Cloud Sacred City had eliminated half of the participants, there were still millions of people present. So many people participated in the competition. How many passed in the end? Jun Jinxing looked at the crowd and couldn't help but sigh. Just try your best. Chi Chin Feng was obviously a little guilty and said with a bitter smile, Look over there. At this moment, an exclamation was heard. Countless eyes looked up into the sky. An alluring figure floated over like a deity. Nyetian's eyes narrowed. He couldn't help but look over. The figure that entered his eyes made his face stiffen. High up in the sky, a figure in red stood there like a beautiful red lotus, blazing and eye-catching. Chapter 39-37. The moment Nyetian saw the woman in red, he couldn't help but be stunned. His gaze trembled slightly before he regained his composure. Even though he had seen countless beauties, the appearance of the woman before him still made his heart tremble. Among all the women he had seen, in terms of beauty, only Cher, Imo Rushi, Rui, Chinyu, and a few others could compare to her. The woman stood coldly high up in the sky like a violet orchid in an icy gorge, and her eyes were cold and indifferent, as if she was indifferent to everything before her. Nie Tian's divine sense moved in an instant, and he couldn't help but be surprised. He couldn't perceive the strength of this woman in red. Just who was this woman? Just what realm had her strength reached for her to be so terrifying? Most importantly, this woman was so young. She looked like a teenage girl. She is the heaven saintess of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion. At this moment, someone recognized the woman's identity and couldn't help but cry out in surprise. They were clearly very excited. When the crowd heard the exclamation, they immediately became excited. Many pairs of eyes stared at the woman in red. Their eyes were burning with excitement and reverence. It was as if the woman in red was not a young martial artist, but a famous martial artist who had been famous for a long time. Heaven Saintess, oh my God, so she is the legendary Heaven Saintess. The Heaven Saintess of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion, a super genius of the all-heaven sacred world. Even she came to participate in the recruitment of the 5 academies. Since the Saintess of Heaven is here, won't he be the martial chief of the 5 academies this time? The crowd looked at the woman in red passionately. The respect in their hearts was written all over their faces. To be able to see the legendary Saintess of Heaven was the greatest honor of their lives. Is this woman that famous? Nie Tian looked at the sky Saintess and frowned. The Heaven Saintess of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion is naturally famous. Qi Qinfeng's eyes trembled as he said, "Rumor has it that the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion chose the holy maiden from all over the all-heaven sacred world. Countless clans and forces sent their geniuses to the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion. It said that there were hundreds of thousands of holy maidens. Yes, the Sky Saintess was one of the hundreds of thousands of geniuses. She passed through many rounds of selection and became the rising star of the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion. The clan that the Saintess of Heaven came from was originally a third-rate clan in a primary saint's world. Because of the Saintess of Heaven's appearance, the clan directly became a large clan in a peak saint's world." Hearing Qi Qinfeng's words, Nie Tian's eyes slightly narrowed. He was shocked. The selection of the Sky Saintess was similar to the recruitment of the 5 great academies. In fact, it was even more terrifying. In the all-heavens sacred world, the heavenly Tao sacred pavilion was much more influential than the 5 great academies. The Saintess of Heaven was able to stand out from hundreds of thousands of geniuses, so it was easy to imagine her talent and strength. Who would have thought that the Saintess of Heaven would actually participate in the recruitment of the 5 academies? What a pleasant surprise. However, to Nie Tian, the appearance of the Saintess of Heaven was not good news. Because he wanted to become the martial chief of the 5 academies, the Saintess of Heaven would undoubtedly become a formidable opponent for him. Although he could not sense the specific cultivation level of the Saintess of Heaven, judging from her aura, her strength was definitely not weaker than the Holy Light Martial Intent, which was ranked in the top 10 of the Hidden Sky list. With Nie Tian's current strength, it was already extremely difficult for him to resist the Holy Light Martial Intent, let alone the Saintess of Heaven. It seemed that the recruitment of the 5 academies was much more difficult than he had imagined. After a long time, the commotion caused by the Saintess of Heaven slowly subsided. Then, the crowd began to wait for the start of the 5 academies' recruitment. Nie Tian, on the other hand, sensed the crowd to see if there was anyone that he needed to pay attention to. However, there were simply too many people present. Even if he activated his comprehensive perception, he could only sense the strength of tens of thousands of people. Moreover, it was only a preliminary perception, so it was not very practical for him. At this moment, he was very curious about how the first round of recruitment would be conducted with so many martial artists present. At this moment, the surrounding crowd began to discuss. Clearly, they were looking forward to the recruitment of the 5 academies. This time, the 5 academies' joint recruitment will bring together all the geniuses of the sacred world. Just thinking about it makes me excited. The 5 academies are the holy land of martialism of the sacred world. Who doesn't want to enter them to cultivate and become a legend? However, it's a pity that with so many people participating in the recruitment, only a few will be able to enter the 5 academies. The rise of geniuses is the sign of prosperity in the world of martial arts. However, I wonder who will take the position of martial leader of the 5 academies this time. The Saintess of Heaven of the Heaven Sacred Pavilion has appeared. She should be the most powerful candidate for martial leader this time. The super genius of the Angel Clan, Holy Light Martial Intent. He is already a 4-winged angel at such a young age. He should also have the ability to compete for martial leader this time. The Azura clan's demon Azura 5 Conquerors is said to have awakened the primitive Azura body. He is an exceptional genius that only appears once in a million years in the Azura clan. He's also a popular candidate for martial leader this time. I heard that the Demon Clan has also sent someone this time. Furthermore, they've sent the demon's son, Xiao Wanjia. That guy is extremely infamous in the sacred world. I'm afraid he'll cause quite a stir during the recruitment. The myriad sound demon palaces Gong Yuzigi and the prison clans Yuchanchi are all capable of competing for martial leader. None of them are weaklings. The 5 academies recruitment this time will be interesting. The crowd discussed and mentioned a few famous names. They were all extremely famous young geniuses in the sacred world. Nietian secretly thought of these names. In his heart, he had already regarded these people as his competitors. However, it was clear that these people would not pay attention to Nietian. Nietian was only a nobody. Hey, have you guys heard? A few days ago, an interesting thing happened in the Haiyan auction house. A divine sage of the heavenly mandate realm actually withstood the power of 9 streaks of blood tribulation in the auction house. At this time, a voice suddenly rang out, and it was Nietan. 9 streaks of blood calamity power? That's not possible. I heard that the blood calamity power has a great impact on the bloodline. No one has ever been able to withstand 5 streaks of blood calamity power. You must have heard it through hearsay. It's not worth believing, someone snorted. Clearly, he did not believe what that person said. It's absolutely true. I heard that the kid was invited by the city lord of Haiyan City later. It should be the city lord who wants to rope him in. That person laughed and said, if that kid participates in the recruitment of the 5 academies, he might bring a surprise. What kind of surprise can a mere heavenly mandate Saint Master bring? Moreover, he withstood 9 streaks of blood calamity power. Even if he really survived, he's probably recuperating now. He won't be able to recover without a few years. Someone objected and sneered. That's true. That person curled his lips and did not say anything more. Nietian could not help twitching the corner of his mouth when he heard the conversation between these people. He did not say anything. Chapter 39-38. The azure-robed old man's appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everyone looked at him, waiting for him to speak. Everyone, I'll cut to the chase. Next, we'll begin the first round of the 5 academies recruitment test. The azure-robed old man's gaze swept across the crowd. His eyes emitted a sharp light. As he spoke, he waved his hand. Immediately, a stream of light floated out and rushed into the sky. A huge space-time gate floated there. Time Gate. Everyone looked at the gate of time and space high up in the sky and immediately came to a realization. The next test would be conducted in another world. Everyone, the next test will be conducted in an inner world. Following this, the green-robed old man continued. Each of you has an assessment token of the 5 academies. Once you enter this world, it will depend on your own abilities. As long as we can get them together. 10 test tokens, and you'll be considered to have passed the first test. His voice wasn't loud, but it was deafening in everyone's ears like a clap of thunder. It turned out that the rules of the first round of the test were so simple and crude. All the martial artists would enter an inner world and kill each other. Furthermore, the criteria for passing the first round of the test was extremely harsh. Every cultivator had to gather 10 assessment tokens before they could be considered to have passed. In other words, for every martial artist who advanced, at least 9 martial artists would be eliminated. Of course, this was only the most ideal situation. If someone didn't abide by the rules, killed the innocent, and casually seized the command tokens of others, then if a single person seized a few tens or hundreds of command tokens, then even more people would be eliminated. Just now, Tian had been wondering how the test would be conducted with millions of people at the same time. He didn't expect the first round of the test to be so bloody and cruel. Everyone, you can enter the gate of time and space now. A moment later, the green-robed old man spoke again in a loud voice. As soon as these words were spoken, all the warriors became excited. Countless figures moved in unison. Like a raging wave, they rushed toward the space-time gate high up in the sky. Fortunately, the space-time gate was large enough. It was thousands of meters wide and could allow thousands of martial artists to enter at the same time. The crowd entered very quickly. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the millions of people had entered. Tian was not in a hurry. He waited until most of the people had entered before he leaped into the space-time gate with Jun Jianxing and the others. The moment he stepped into the gate of time and space, an unfamiliar environment appeared before Tian's eyes. He was surrounded by strong gales and dark clouds, and below him was a bottomless abyss. Tian looked around and saw that Jun Jianxing and the others were not too far away from him. He immediately released a wave of sword intent and let Jun Jianxing and the others come closer. This was a sealed inner world. Everyone seemed to have gone mad, killing and plundering wantonly. The few of them were not very strong, so it was better for them to stay together. Jun Jianxing, Mo, Niet Qingwan, and Qi Chunfeng immediately came over and stood together with Tian, leaning on each other. Tian, what should we do? Mo looked at Tian and asked excitedly. Don't move around. Let's look around first. Tian nodded slightly and glanced around, trying to sense the aura in the void. This sealed world was much larger than he had expected. Even though millions of martial artists had entered it, it still seemed sparse. In the distance, many warriors had already fought and killed each other. Tian, look over there. At this time, Jun Jianxing pointed to the sky and reminded Tian. Tian looked up and saw many space-time vortexes floating in the sky. They were the space-time gates. Those space-time gates should be the passage to leave this world. Tian's eyes narrowed slightly and said with a nod. Those who had their tokens taken but did not have the strength to snatch the tokens of others, or those who had collected 10 tokens, could directly leave through those space-time gates. Brothers, come quickly. There are a few weak chickens here. Right at this moment, a shrill voice rang out, followed by a deafening rumble. A terrifying force whizzed over, stirring up heaven-shaking waves in the air as it pressed down on Tian and the others. Boom! Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he reacted quickly. The sword of sky appeared in his hand and slashed out. The sword's shadow was like a mountain, pressing forward and directly smashing the power of the waves. In the next moment, a slender figure appeared in midair, staring at Tian with a pair of cold eyes. He seemed to be very surprised. Obviously, he did not expect that Tian, who was only in the 9th realm of the heavenly mandate realm, could easily take his palm. What? Does my weakling surprise you? Tian looked at the man and sneered, his eyes releasing a cold light. You are courting death. The man instantly felt a chill run down his spine. However, he was still very arrogant. With a low growl, he moved in the blink of an eye and thrust his palm out. Boundless, vigorous power whizzed out, forming a huge wave in the air that crashed down towards Tian. Oof! Seeing this, Tian sneered. Then, the sword of sky streaked across the void. The sword's shadow was like a blazing light. With a crash, it tore the huge wave apart and pressed down on the warrior. Don't! Caught off guard, the martial artist screamed in horror, his voice trembling. Give me the token! In the next moment, the sword's silhouette paused in the air, and then the momentum of the sword suddenly weakened. It only blasted the cultivator back a few steps. Tian's expression was cold as he spoke in a deep voice. He did not want to kill anyone. He only wanted the token. But this time, several figures appeared behind the warrior. Each of them had a powerful aura. They were all cultivators of Saint Tiani. Don't even think about it. Seeing that help had come, the warrior's expression changed. He roared, "Brothers, let's attack together and kill this brat." Obviously, this guy was still unaware of Nyatian's ruthless methods. Okay. The others responded in unison. Then, they moved in unison. Their aura was wild, and the space around them rumbled. They pressed down on Nyatian. Seeing this, Jun Jianxing wanted to help, but he was stopped by EMO, just a few small fries. Nyatian can handle them. EMO smiled faintly. He seemed to be very confident in Nyatian. Boom! Just as he finished speaking, Nyatian's body shook, and a terrifying sword aura soared into the sky. It was like the roar of a wild beast, and the shadow of the sword was like a raging dragon. Wherever it passed, it exploded with destructive power. Those figures didn't even have time to react before they were slashed by the sword. The warrior was blown away by the violent waves. The scene in front of him shocked the skinny warrior. His eyes were dull, and he was scared out of his wits. At this time, Nyatian took a step forward. He stared at the skinny warrior and said coldly, Here for you." The skinny warrior came to his senses. Suddenly, he was tongue-tied. He threw the test token over with trembling hands. Nyatian took the command medallion and turned to look at the others. They were smart enough to hand over their command medallions without hesitation. "Get lost." Nyatian's face was gloomy. He spat out one word coldly. The warriors were scared shitless and ran away. Chapter 39:39. Nyatian forcefully snatched the tokens of those people, and his lips curled into a faint smile. But at this moment, he suddenly felt that something was amiss. It was as if a pair of eyes were staring at him from the dark, causing him to feel an inexplicable chill in his heart. Then, he suddenly turned around, and a ghostly figure appeared. It flickered in front of him, and then disappeared. So fast, Nyatian's heart trembled. He didn't even see the figure's face clearly. "Nyatian, are you okay?" At this moment, Jun Jianxing came to Nyatian's side and asked with a frown. "I'm fine." Nyatian nodded, but he still felt a little strange. Then, they flew towards a place where there were fewer people. At this time, the warriors had just entered this world. Because everyone wanted to advance, there was a lot of hostility between them. The strength of Nyatian and the others was not the strongest among all the cultivators, so it was better to avoid this wave of attacks. A bunch of small fries, want to run? However, right at that moment, a deep, angry roar rang out. Immediately after, a figure appeared, moving in extremely fast speed. Carrying a violent force, he charged towards Nyatian and the others. Boom! In an instant, a giant palm appeared and set off waves in the void. It was as if thousands of horses were galloping, as if it wanted to swallow everything. What a powerful force! Nyatian's eyes dimmed slightly. He felt a slight stagnation in his chest and a sense of suffocation. Die! At this moment, the person screamed and a terrifying aura surged. The world shook as if it was about to be overturned. Eight Baron's sword. Nyatian's eyes dimmed again. Then, he wielded the sword in the sky. The sword was released like a landslide. Suddenly, the sword's aura flashed, and a majestic sword's momentum was released, whistling into the void. Boom! In the next moment, the two forces collided. Suddenly, the surrounding void trembled. A terrifying wave of air rolled and surged in all directions. Immediately, Nyatian's figure moved slightly, and he retreated 1,000 meters away. However, the other figure did not retreat at all. Instead, it pressed forward even more violently. "One more palm strike, and I'll take your life." That person shot up into the sky and swooped down. Where his palm landed, a monstrous killing intent descended. In an instant, boundless waves appeared in the sky, surging violently and pressing down on Nyatian. This guy is actually a heavenly tribulation saint king. Nyatian steadied himself, and his expression immediately changed. He was secretly shocked. Among all the participating warriors, the vast majority of them were either saint masters of the heavenly mandate realm or Saint Lord Tiani. Most of them were concentrated between the fifth tier of the Heavenly Mandate Realm and the fifth tier of Heavenly Mandate Realm. Warriors who could reach the level of Heavenly Tribulation Saint King were extremely rare. However, the person Yetian was currently facing was actually a Heavenly Tribulation Saint Ruler. How could he not be surprised? Yetian. At this time, EMO and the others wanted to help, but they were blocked by other warriors. In this world, everyone fought for themselves. The strong could plunder the weak at will. This was the law of survival in this world. EMO and the others were not strong. Naturally, they were easy targets for others to plunder. Nyetian frowned and glanced at EMO and the others. Seeing that they could still hold on, he was not worried. EMO and Jun Jianxing's cultivation was not high, but their combat strength was not bad. Facing ordinary opponents, even if they could not win, they could at least protect themselves. As for Qi Chanfeng, this guy was only a little cowardly, but his cultivation was solid at the 9th tier of Heavenly Mandate Realm. Unless he encountered a Heavenly Tribulation Saint King warrior, he would be fine. But Nye Tian, facing a Heavenly Tribulation Saint King warrior alone, was a bit difficult. Celestial Sword, reverse the sun. Nye Tian felt the rolling momentum approaching. His eyes narrowed slightly, and then he slashed out with his sword. The Celestial Sword came out again. The sword's shadow was like a mountain, and the crazy momentum brought with it a monstrous battle intent, forcefully fighting against the Heavenly Tribulation warrior. Boom! The two moves collided, and heaven and earth shook. The terrible power raged in the void, as if to destroy everything. In the next moment, Nye Tian's figure flew backward again. When he steadied himself, there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. After all, he was only at the 9th tier of the Heavenly Mandate Realm, and his opponent was a Heavenly Tribulation Saint King. The gap in strength was so big that talent could not make up for it. The man wounded Nye Tian with one palm, but his face showed surprise instead of joy. Obviously, he did not expect Nye Tian to be able to take his palm. Boy, you are much stronger than I thought. The man smiled coldly, and the corner of his mouth pulled up into an evil arc. He said, although you're only at the 9th tier of the Heavenly Mandate Realm, your combat ability is definitely not weaker than ordinary saints of the 9th tier of Heavenly Mandate Realm. It seems that you are a super genius. After saying that, his eyes could not help but twinkle. He was very excited, like a wolf that had seen a delicious prey. Killing a super genius gave him a perverted sense of satisfaction. Humph! Nye Tian felt the murderous intent of the opponent, but he smiled lightly and said, You, a Heavenly Tribulation Saint King, are much weaker than I thought. You want to kill me on your own? You're dreaming. You are courting death. The man's face darkened. He was enraged by Nye Tian's provocation. His body trembled, and wild power surged out of him, turning into huge waves in the air. Then, they condensed into giant beasts with surging auras that could devour anything in their path. This was a water attribute warrior. To be able to use the water attribute power to such an extent, it showed how strong his talent was. Come on. Nye Tian looked at the man, but he was not afraid at all. Instead, his face was cold, and he said provocatively, Come on, reckless dog, go to hell. The man's eyes darkened, and he revealed a ferocious look like a beast. Then, he growled, and suddenly in the void, waves of horrifying power appeared, as if thousands of demons were howling, surging and surging. Nye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and then the 9 dragon veins in his body began to operate crazily. The chi of the dragon farmer was released, forming an ocean of dragon chi behind him. Roar! In the next instant, a giant dragon appeared, and with a growl, the dragon's roar shook the 9 heavens. Then its huge body rolled out, rushing towards the endless waves. Boom! Walala! Then, the huge dragon roared. Its aura was like a rainbow, and a destructive force surged out. The violent waves were actually forcefully torn apart and collapsed in the void. How is this possible? The sudden scene made the man's face change, and he immediately screamed. Obviously, he did not expect that Nietan, who was only in the 9th tier of the heavenly mandate realm, could burst out such a shocking power in an instant. Bang! Then, before the man could react, he was hit by the giant dragon, and his figure was directly thrown out. At this moment, Nietion's figure moved in an instant, and he slashed out with his sword. The sharp sword was condensed into a sword net, and before the man's figure could stabilize, it directly enveloped him. Damn it! The man was imprisoned by the sword net, and he completely lost the ability to resist. His eyes were low, like a beast, and he growled coldly. Token. Nietion did not waste time and spat out 2 words coldly. Chapter 3940. Take it. The man's eyes were bloodshot. However, under Nietion's coercion, he had no choice but to give in. He threw an assessment token to Nietion. To him, the assessment token was not important. If he lost it, he could take it from others. However, if he lost his life, he would lose everything. Don't play tricks with me. I want all the tokens you have. After Nietion took the test token, the corners of his mouth curled up into a sinister smile as he said in a deep voice. He didn't believe that a heavenly tribulation martialist would only have 1 token on him until now. Here you go. Sensing that the net of sword intent around him was slowly tightening, the man's expression changed, and he took out 8 tokens and threw them over. He knew that Nietion's patience was limited. Nietion did not kill him now, not because he did not dare to. He just did not want to. The corner of Nietion's mouth twitched as he took the command medallion. Very good. Now get the hell out of here. He didn't expect this person to have 9 tokens on him. If he added his own token, he would have exactly 10 tokens. Young man, I will remember you. Although the cultivator was unwilling, he only threw out a few harsh words before leaving. The power Nietion had displayed just now was so terrifying that he had never expected it to be like this. In reality, he did not use his full strength. However, he was already a little afraid of Nietion. Therefore, he did not want to waste time with him. With his strength, it was easy for him to take 10 more tokens. Therefore, he did not need to continue fighting with Nietion. It was too risky. After Nietion took the tokens, he moved and flew to where Jun Jinxing was. At that moment, Jun Jinxing was fighting with a warrior of the 5th level of Tianyi. Jun Jinxing held the Heaven's Punishment Blade in his hand. Every time he swung his sword, the air trembled. The sharp aura of the sword seemed to be able to cut through everything. However, the warrior was not easy to deal with. Golden light bloomed from his body, and a violent aura filled the space for hundreds of thousands of meters. Stinking brat, hand over the token, and I'll spare your life. The man sneered, his eyes fixed on Jun Jinxing, not noticing Nietion's arrival at all. You? Jun Jinxing sneered coldly. His Xingtian blade slashed across the void, and suddenly, a sword light whizzed out. Wherever it passed, the void trembled, and the horrifying sword shadow went straight for the warrior. Courting death. The man's eyes darkened, and he growled. Suddenly, golden light bloomed from his body and formed into a giant golden Buddha. The giant Buddha slammed its palm forward, and a golden palm appeared. Suddenly, the void trembled, and a terrifying aura pressed down on Jun Jinxing. Boom! In the next moment, the sword shadow and the palm shadow collided, causing the heavens and earth to tremble and the void to tremble. Violent waves of air rolled out as if the world was turning upside down. Nietion watched quietly from the side and had no intention of intervening. Although the metal attribute warrior was strong, he was still no match for Jun Jinxing. On the other side, Emo was fighting with a warrior in green. His opponent was a level 9 heavenly righteousness saint. However, under Emo's 4 pairs of angel wings, the warrior was forced to retreat and had no way to fight back. At this time, Emo had broken through to level 1 heavenly righteousness. If he opened his 4 pairs of angel wings, Nietion might not have a 100% chance of winning. Then, Nietion looked at Qi Chenfeng. The latter was fighting with a female warrior. The female warrior looked very young, but had the strength of level 5 heavenly righteousness. At this time, Qi Chenfeng was being suppressed by the female warrior and was about to lose. Nietion's eyes narrowed when he saw this scene. He then moved and prepared to help. However, when he saw the female warrior's face clearly, he was stunned for a moment and shouted out the opponent's name, Tang Yuyu. He never thought that the person who was suppressing Qi Chanfeng was Tang Yuyu. Nietion already knew that Tang Yuyu was here for the recruitment of the 5 academies. However, he had only seen Tang 13 twice. He had not seen Tang Yuyu yet. Now that he saw Tang Yuyu, he could not believe his eyes. Tang Yuyu's strength had reached the astonishing level 5 heavenly righteousness. It seemed that Tang Yuyu had encountered a great opportunity during this period of time. Moreover, Tang Yuyu's appearance had changed slightly. She was more delicate, and her figure was more alluring. Lord Nietion, save me. At this time, Qi Chunfeng finally could not hold on any longer. He shouted at the sight of Nietion. It doesn't matter who you call. Tang Yuyu shouted coldly. Hand over the token, and I will spare your life. As she spoke, her figure moved, and she directly charged towards Qi Chunfeng to kill him. Qi Chunfeng sensed the incoming killing intent. His face trembled in fear and turned deathly pale in an instant. Tang Yuyu, do you still remember me? At this time, a calm voice was heard. A silver-haired figure appeared and stood between Tang Yuyu and Qi Chunfeng. Tang Yuyu was startled. When she saw the figure's face, her eyes lit up and she shouted with joy, Nietion. Nietion smiled faintly and nodded. That's me. Tang Yuyu's face was filled with excitement. She finally realized that the Lord Nietion in Qi Chunfeng was the Nietion she knew. Tang Yuyu, it's only been a few years, and your strength has reached such a terrifying level. Nietion looked at Tang Yuyu and exclaimed, You're not bad yourself. Tang Yuyu chuckled, but her face was filled with unconcealable joy. Finally, her strength surpassed Nietion's. Seeing this, Qi Chunfeng finally snapped out of his daze and asked with a confused expression, Lord Nietion, do you know each other? She's my friend. Nietion smiled faintly and asked, Are you all right? No, I'm fine. Qi Chunfeng nodded awkwardly and muttered, Why are all your friends freaks? After arriving at Vast Cloud Sacred City, Qi Chunfeng met many of Nietion's friends. From EMO, Niet Qingwan, Tang 13, and now Tang Yuyu, all of them were monstrous geniuses. Even a martial slave Ni, jamming in the auction house, was a super genius with a rebel dragon body. As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. The friends of geniuses were basically all geniuses. Where's Tang 13? At this time, Nietion couldn't see Tang 13, so he asked, I'm here. Before Tang Yuyu could answer, Tang 13's voice was heard and her silhouette appeared in a flash. Nietion turned around and saw Tang 13. The latter seemed to be panicking, which made him feel strange. Look over there and you'll know. Tang 13 bitterly smiled and pointed at the empty space. Nietion raised his head and looked over. What he saw made his facial expression change, and his expression became sluggish. High up in the sky, a terrifying gust of ghostly energy appeared. It roared like a wild beast and attacked in all directions. Everywhere it passed, blood was spilled. Chapter 39:41. 10,000 Tribulations of Cultivation. Nietion's expression changed when he heard this name. Although he could not see the figure in the ghost chi vortex clearly, he sensed a familiar aura. Previously, a pair of eyes had been observing him in the dark, but he only saw a figure flash by. At that moment, he sensed that the figure was the person in the ghost chi vortex, the fiend Sun Xiao Wanjia. Who is this guy? How could it be so brutal? Qi Chinfeng's eyes narrowed as he stared at the ghost chi vortex. Is that guy crazy? How dare you kill people like this? At this moment, Emo's figure also arrived and said in a deep voice. Tang Yu looked at the sky with her beautiful eyes slightly trembling, as if she was a little afraid. She said, He is the demon son of the demon race, a super genius ranked in the top 3 of the Hidden Sky ranking. However, he was naturally bloodthirsty, and his methods were vicious and cruel. He was truly a murderous demon. Unexpectedly, Five-star university, the academy's recruitment actually attracted this guy. Looks like the following tests won't be peaceful. After saying that, Tang Yu could not help but shake his head helplessly. Although she was very strong now, she knew her own limits. She couldn't be compared to an expert like Xiao Wanjie. At this moment, she could only choose to avoid it and hope that Xiao Wanjie would not directly attack her. Nie Tian frowned and looked at the ghost chi vortex with a gloomy expression. A genius like Xiao Wanjie was too terrifying. Countless people would die in his hands under his wanton slaughter. Kill! At this moment, a shrill howl rang out from the ghost chi vortex high up in the sky. After that, the ghost chi vortex suddenly trembled, and an endless amount of ghost chi exploded, condensing into dozens of ghost claws that wreaked havoc in all directions. Ah! In an instant, everywhere the Een ghost claw passed, flesh and blood flew in all directions, and miserable howls resounded. The scene was bloody and horrifying. Nie Tian's face darkened. Even though he was hundreds of thousands of meters away, he could clearly feel the tyrannical power of the soaring ghost chi. The violent aura was so terrifying that it could make one's heart tremble. With a single move, Xiao Wanjie killed hundreds of people in the blink of an eye. After all, these people were all martial geniuses that had been chosen from various saints' worlds. Every single one of them was the hope of a clan or an organization, yet they had been killed just like that. It was truly a sigh. This guy's strength is so terrifying. Jun Jianxing's eyes trembled slightly, and his face sank. He could not help but exclaim in horror. Tang 13's expression was ugly. She said in a low voice, "According to the rumors, Wanjie's martial art is called the 10,000 Immortal Ghost Technique. This technique is extremely evil. It can absorb energy from a warrior's blood and condense it into ghost energy. Perhaps this was the cruel and bloodthirsty nature of Xiao Wanjie the reason." This. Qi Chenfeng's face turned ugly. His eyes were trembling in fear as he said, "This is only the first round of the test. He only needs 10 tokens. There's no need to kill people like this." The corner of Tang 13's lips twitched. A genius like Xiao Wanjie doesn't care about the test. Maybe he joined a recruitment test to kill for fun. Qi Chenfeng was stunned. He swallowed his saliva and didn't say anything else. If there were a few more people like Xiao Wanjie in the competition, who knows how many people would die? Run! This murderous demon is too scary. At this moment, the crowd was in chaos. They scattered in all directions, trying to get away from the whirlpool of ghost energy. "Let's get out of here." Tang Yu saw the whirlpool of ghost energy rushing over. His eyes trembled slightly, and he said in a low voice. Nie Tian's eyes darkened. He thought about it, and finally decided to leave. Seeing Xiao Wanjie killing the innocent, he was furious and wanted to stop him. However, his current strength was far too weak. It was impossible for him to fight against a powerhouse like Xiao Wanjie head-on. He was not a selfless and benevolent saint. He did not have such a saint's heart. When someone was in danger, he could help. However, the condition was that his life was not in danger. If he knew he was no match for the opponent and still tried to be brave, it would not be benevolence. It would be stupidity. Nie Tian's group was very fast. In a blink of an eye, they retreated tens of thousands of meters away. However, some people were not as lucky as them. The ghost energy whirlpool crazily attacked in the sky. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of warriors died inside. This guy is too cruel. Jun Jianxing's face was dark. It was obvious that he was angry. This guy has no intention of stopping. How many more people does he want to kill? Qi Chenfeng's face was full of fear. His eyes were shaking, worried that Xiao Wanjie would come for them. Damn it! Tang Yuyu's face was dark. She said in a low voice, "Where are those so-called geniuses? Don't they have the ability to fight against Xiao Wanjie? Why aren't they doing anything? Though those geniuses are strong, Xiao Wanjie's methods are cruel. They are not easy to deal with. They will not take the risk to fight against Xiao Wanjie." Tang 13 laughed and said helplessly, "Are we just going to let Xiao Wanjie kill like this?" Tang Yuyu's face darkened as she said coldly, "What will we do? I hope Xiao Wanjie is tired and will stop on his own. Tang 13 shook her head and said in a low voice, Xiao Wanjie is cruel and bloodthirsty. Why would he stop on his own? Tang Yuyu frowned. Then, a strange color flashed across her eyes. She stepped out of her own volition. Wife, are you crazy? Tang 13 saw that Tang Yuyu's expression wasn't right, and her face changed color. She stepped forward and stopped her. Tang Yuyu's face was dark. She stared at the ghost energy whirlpool with coldness in her eyes. She said in a low voice, Someone has to stop him. Even if someone does, it won't be you. Tang 13 was a little impatient. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He knew that Tang Yuyu was very capable. But to fight against Xiao Wanjie was like throwing an egg against a rock. Why can't it be me? Tang Yuyu was very determined. She said in a low voice, If I use that power, I might have a chance to defeat him. Are you crazy? Tang 13 felt Tang Yuyu's determination and became impatient. She growled in a low voice. Nie Tian frowned. It seemed like Tang Yuyu had some kind of powerful trump card that he couldn't use. A bunch of ants, all of you shall die. Just at this moment, Xiao Wanjie's shrill voice rang out again. Immediately, the ghost chi whirlpool expanded again. Suddenly, the ghost chi violently soared into the sky, and a terrifying, devouring power filled the space of hundreds of thousands of meters. In the next second, the ghost energy passed through and the sky became bloody. Hundreds of warriors died on the spot. Their bodies turned into skeletons and disappeared in the air.